Hello, good morning. I'm sorry I'm late today, but I hope you had the time to settle down. बहुत सारे लोग बाहर खड़े थे, बहुत सारे लोग अभी आ रहे थे, तो आप सभी को समय मिल गया होगा. Now in the last class we had completed our journey with Pakistan. We were slow so that there is adequate time for everyone to basically settle down with the rhythm of what happens in international relations, because a lot of you read a lot of things, but those lot of things may not be as relevant in the examination. आप बहुत सारी चीजें पढ़ते होंगे, पर वो बहुत सारी चीजें एग्जामिनेशन के हिसाब से relevant हो ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है. So thereby we understood that when we are looking at any relationship, we look at what consistently has been part of the pattern, what majorly is in the news cycle, what makes into the news cycle. Or फिर whenever we have grasp of such issues, we look at what are the problems inherent therein, what are the challenges, what is India's position is most important. All right, in anything, what is India's position, what are India's challenges is most important. And thereby we understand that every topic that we study may yield to certain questions. So we start asking ourselves questions about any particular thing that we are studying. But any question, generally its nature is always, what is India's position, what are the implications for India. India क्या सोचता है इस चीज के बारे में और इसके क्या परिणाम हो सकते हैं इंडिया के लिए. तो अगर कोई प्रॉब्लम है तो what is the solution. So that is basically the nature of the issues that you study. Today we are going to start with Afghanistan. All right. Now our relations with Afghanistan. Do you have any idea of the nature of relations that we have with Afghanistan? हाथ का इस्तेमाल करें, इतनी भीड़ में मैं आवाज से नहीं पहचान सकता. कॉर्डियल एंड फ्रेंडली रिलेशंस, एक राय ये है. दूसरी कोई राय, डिफरेंट ओपिनियन? यस. Okay, relationship with Afghanistan varies with the government which is there. Isn't that the case with every other country? Right. Okay, Afghanistan has undergone so much of political turmoil. So basically, two kinds of opinion we see. One is an opinion which says that, you know, the relationship are cordial, friendly. Another opinion is the relationship depends upon the nature of the government which is there in Afghanistan. Both of them, it is not about right and wrong. Both of them in their own circumstances is a correct opinion. So if we look at Afghanistan, we understand that first of all, a country like Afghanistan would be important for India because it is located in India's neighborhood. So basics, starting with the basics. Does India share a border with Afghanistan? Yes. India shares a border with Afghanistan. All of you remember from the first class. Around 116 kilometers of border with Afghanistan. So that is how Afghanistan becomes important for us as a neighbor in the same region and a country with which we share a border. Now what else can be seen as a driver of this relationship? What else can we say drives this relationship? Historical, cultural. So these are the aspects that you start thinking about in terms of any relationship, right? Now, as we had said that for any relationship, the most important thing is to look at the idea of location. कैमरा टीम से किसी को भेजिए यहाँ पे ये बोर्ड ऑपरेट करने में थोड़ी मेरी मदद करें. So basically we talked about location, we can talk about other factors. So let's simply look at other factors. How far can you go in the history of Afghanistan when you are trying to understand the relationship? Indus Valley civilization. But from today's perspective, that would not be much important. Lekin at the level of awareness, we understand that in terms of commonality of cultural sphere, we can go back to ancient history. All right. So in the ancient history, if you see, if you go back to the period of what were called 16 republics, Mahajanpadas, even at that point in time, you find mention of places like Gandhar. Gandhar is today's Kandhar, or the Gandhar art, or the invasions that came into India from northwest, starting with the Greeks, or if you have heard of the Indo-Bactrians. This is the region where these cultural elements, these political elements in ancient history developed. So from that perspective, from the perspective of imagination, you can imagine that Afghanistan is close by India, and thereby there is bound to be cultural similarities. So that is another thing. Now coming back to the medieval times. In the medieval times, what commonality do you find? In the medieval times, do you find any commonalities? Yes, if you look at the period of Delhi Sultanate period as it starts, well, we find that invasions are coming from that part of India. So you have heard of the Khyber Pass. Khyber Pass is a very historical location, because we generally understand board. We generally understand that the invasions coming to India geographically, or invaders coming to India geographically, had to go through the Khyber Pass. Now, where is this location? This location, Suleiman Range is correct, geographical understanding. This location basically again is relevant in the context of today's Afghanistan. पर आज ये तो नहीं कह सकते कि वहां से invasion आएगा इसलिए वो important है. But we understand that in India, in the medieval period, in the ruling, among the ruling elites, Afghans were important. All right, either as origin of some of the ruling families, or as elements in courts like the Mughal courts. And many of the Indian rulers also had Afghans fighting in their army. All right, from Maharani Lakshmi Bai to in some of the Maratha armies, to in some of the armies belonging to the royal families from Rajputana or Rajasthan. Whatever you see that there is some engagement. People are coming in one form or the other. So that similarity, that familiarity is there. Now come to the modern times. What is the modern time? Let's say by and large the period coinciding with the emergence of British rule in India. Do you see any commonality between India and Afghanistan? Any link? Right. So in this particular period, what is happening is some of the most important developments which dictate India-Afghanistan relations even now. Right? If you have done your world history, you are aware of what are called Anglo-Afghan wars. Anglo-Afghan wars. Right? So Anglo-Afghan wars are important milestones in the history of this relationship. Why? Because you see, much of what we see as today's India is a byproduct of that historical period. The Britishers came to India, they consolidated their rule in India within one administrative unit in the geography that we look at today. So at that point in time, the Britishers did not have control over Afghanistan. They did not control Afghanistan. Now, so what did they control? They controlled what today is Pakistan till that extent. However, Britishers were always interested in what is happening in Afghanistan. Why were Britishers interested in what is happening in Afghanistan? Because this period is known for a phenomenon called the Great Game. What is the Great Game? If you read people like Rudyard Kipling, नाम सुना है Rudyard Kipling का आपने? Most famous for the Jungle Book. All right, the story of Mowgli. But Rudyard Kipling was also a journalist in the British period. And he has written many books. So in those kinds of references, you will find the term Great Game. Now, Great Game is nothing but an imperial rivalry. So this is an era of empires. This is a period of empires. All right. So on the one hand, in India, there is British Empire, and Britishers wanted to secure their possessions in India. Britishers को भाई इंडिया से बहुत कुछ फायदा हो गया, छोटे से आइलैंड से आए हुए लोग थे, इतना रिसोर्स नहीं देखा था उन्होंने, तो उनको लगा कि अब इंडिया को कंट्रोल करना है पूरी तरह से. कैसे करेंगे? तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल डोमेस्टिकली दे विल कंसोलिडेट देयर रूल्स. सो दैट्स व्हाई यू फाइंड दैट डिफरेंट गवर्नर जनरल्स केम अप विद डिफरेंट पॉलिसीज. Externally also, the concern was that no other power should be able to displace the Britishers. So in the northwest direction and also towards China, the basic concern of Britishers was preventing the expansion of Russians. All right, Russia was under the Tsarist ruler at this point in time, and Russia always wanted to expand southwards. Why? Geography always is fundamental. Even today's Russia does not have a warm water port. है ना, ऐसा port नहीं है रशिया के पास which is operable throughout the year. Even though Russia has a Pacific coast. So even in the Pacific coast, Russia's ports are frozen for some time in the year. So Russia always wanted an access to the Indian Ocean at that point in time also. So southwards expansion of Russia is a reality that was evident in how Russia in the 19th century expanded towards what is called Central Asia. है ना, आज जो कजाकिस्तान, तुर्कमेनिस्तान, ये सारे देश हैं, these are the countries that came under the Russian influence in the 18th, 19th century. Russia was in the expansionary period. And then after Central Asia, what comes? Afghanistan. Afghanistan borders Central Asia. So Afghanistan then was an important piece of geography in the imperial rivalry between the Britishers and the Russians. This is what is called Great Game. Imperial rivalry between Britain and Tsarist Russia. Russia wanted to expand southwards and Britishers wanted to prevent the southwards expansion of Russia. वो चाहते थे कि वो southward नहीं आ पाए. तो इसमें Afghanistan became an important location in the Great Game. All right. So basically, the Britishers then, in this particular period, started treating Afghanistan as a buffer state. So buffer state, the concept of buffer state also dates back to this period. All right, the British period, the 19th century. We are talking about the 19th century. So buffer state. So Britishers tried to control Afghanistan territorially. They sent expeditionary forces, but they realized that they could not win. Afghans have defeated everyone. All right, that's why Afghanistan is also एक बहुत ही अब काफी repeated line है. Afghanistan is known as the graveyard of empires. So people give the example of how even Alexander, who won the world, could not control Afghanistan. He died in that process. And then the Britishers could not control Afghanistan. And then the Americans could not control Afghanistan, and also Russians could not control Afghanistan. So the difficulty of terrain, the nature of people, all these factors basically give rise to this kind of a term. So Britishers then, after not being able to directly defeat the Afghans, came up with an ingenious idea. What you can't do with wars, do with policies and treaties. So then in 1893, Afghanistan and British India enter an agreement. The result of that agreement is the Durand Line, which basically demarcated what was British possessions in India and Afghanistan. So Britishers said to the Afghans that we would allow you to be independent. All right. So they signed an agreement with the Emir of Afghanistan. So in return for acknowledging the independence of Afghanistan, the Britishers then entered into arrangements with Afghan rulers wherein they retained a say in their external and defense policy. So basically this is the idea of buffer state that you would see, that Britishers tried to create weak states surrounding India, है ना? Directly rule करने की बजाय ऐसे states जो weak है, generally British rule को challenge नहीं कर सकते, right? And their external and defense policies, Britishers said we would control. In return, what will we give you? We will recognize that you are an independent sovereign. We would also provide you some financial support. ये British policy थी. So this is how they started creating buffer states around India, or treating some countries as buffer states around India. So they treated Tibet as a buffer state. They treated Afghanistan as a buffer state. They treated Nepal as a buffer state. They treated Bhutan as a buffer state. So that is the idea of buffer state. अभी आज के context में हम use नहीं करते buffer state का का term, है ना? Why? Because this is British policy. This is not very relevant today, but this is how the Britishers got engaged with Afghanistan. And Afghanistan became an independent country in the year 1919. 1919, last Anglo-Afghan war, the third Anglo-Afghan war. And in this Anglo-Afghan war, the Afghans declared their independence. So all kinds of Afghan governments will recognize this as the independence year of the Afghanistan. All right, this is the last Anglo-Afghan war where Afghans in a way prevailed over the Britishers. So this is basically how Afghanistan as a modern nation state has come into existence. ऐसे Afghanistan बना है. Now what happened, if we look at the history of this relationship between India and Afghanistan, we find that in the year 1950, India and Afghanistan signed a treaty of friendship. 1950. Treaty of friendship is signed between independent India and Afghanistan. Now this relationship has a context. After partition, after 1947, the Durand Line became the basis of boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So one idea is that friendship between India and Afghanistan is based in some ways on the idea of an enemy's enemy being a friend. All right, because Afghans themselves have some problems with Pakistan. All right, Afghans are not very happy with the modern day boundary. Afghans said during partition period that since the Durand Line was created by Britishers, now when the Britishers are going, there is no validity of this line. So some territories where Afghans were majority and Britishers had included it in as part of what then became Pakistan should be returned to them. है ना? ऐसे इलाके जहाँ पे Afghans majority है and Britishers had taken that away and then included in British India, and now Pakistan should be returned to Afghanistan. What are those areas? So earlier there were areas like FATA, federally administered tribal areas. There was a region called federally administered tribal areas in Pakistan. All right, or today some areas of KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. These are some of the territories that Afghanistan still wants for itself. अभी इसलिए इस साल के 2-3 महीने पहले चले जाओ तो you would find that Taliban and Pakistan government were quarreling. है ना? अफगानिस्तान और में तालिबान की गवर्नमेंट है, पाकिस्तान के कुछ एक्शंस को उनको पसंद नहीं आए. So territorial question is always going to be an important question for any Afghan government. They would like to take back those territories where Pashtuns are a majority, all right, where Afghans are a majority. So that became a contention, and India did not have much of a stake there. India did, those territories now were with Pakistan, and it was a question of contention between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So India का कोई झगड़ा नहीं था, all right. And generally we see that if you remember some of the historical figures participating in freedom struggle, have you heard of Frontier Gandhi, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, or Khudai Khidmatgars? So that is the region where this movement had came up, the red shirt movement, if you have heard of it. Now you can imagine that only because Pakistan and Afghanistan share a common religion, it is not a guarantee of good relations between two countries. Right? So Afghans always have this spirit of maintaining their independence. They would not like to be dominated by even Pakistan. So that is something that informed the relationship. Way early 1950, India and Afghanistan signed a treaty of friendship, peace, friendship and cooperation. Now we move forward, relations remain cordial. Afghanistan itself is stable. So if you see till 1970s, Afghanistan is quite modern. Afghanistan is quite attractive as a tourist destination. It was quite possible to travel from India via Afghanistan, Iran, Turkey to Europe. People used to travel from that road. So it was a quite attractive destination at that point in time because there is some political stability. 1973, Afghanistan witnesses a coup, all right, wherein the ruler of Afghanistan, Mohammad Zahir Shah, is displaced from power, is removed from power. 1973. Now, after this, you would find that Afghanistan enters into a period of turmoil. There is struggle for power in Afghanistan among different factions. Struggle for power. So, some traditionally strong actors with their own, with the basis of their power in their own ethnic groups, and some organized political actors, including some former military officials, forming a political party, they were contending for powers. So what you would see is some form of a socialist oriented government comes into power in Afghanistan in this particular period. All right, a government which also is supported by USSR. USSR supports this government, and remember, at that point in time, Afghanistan has a border with USSR. Afghanistan and USSR share a border. Aaj Central Asia आजाद है, but at that point in time, Central Asian countries were part of USSR. So, even after formation of a government, the contention continues in Afghanistan. Stability नहीं आती है. The government controlled by the socialists is unstable. Either it is attacked by a traditional religiously inspired leaders, traditional ethnic leaders. And in this particular period, when the government is facing a grave threat, the Soviet Union sends its soldiers to Afghanistan. 1979, Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. Soviet Union says that we have sent our soldiers to Afghanistan in response to the calls for support by the government. So we are there to support the government. Government has asked us to come there. The Soviet Union went there because it wanted to safeguard a friendly government in its bordering country. 1979. Now, if you go forward, you will find that Soviets के लिए जाना आसान था, लेकिन कंट्रोल करना अफगानिस्तान को आसान नहीं था. So Soviets remained in Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. If you have read world history, you realize that 1989 is a period which can be seen as a starting point of collapse of Soviet Union. All right, Soviet Union weaknesses come to the fore. इससे पहले Soviet Union is considered to be powerful, but 1989 onwards it becomes clear that Soviet Union has certain fault lines. Economically, strategically, Soviet Union is overstretched. So Soviet Union's collapse coincides with Soviet Union withdrawing from Afghanistan. So this is where the genesis of today's conflict in Afghanistan is there. So in this period, what you would see is USA utilizing the location of Pakistan. So earlier we had understood that Pakistan is strategically located, its location is attractive to many actors. So in this period, when USSR is in Afghanistan, US found it an opportunity to strike at USSR without getting involved in a direct war. So period of Cold War is also a period of proxy wars, indirect warfare. So this is one example. Now Soviet Union is fighting with those who want an independent Afghanistan, also called Mujahideens, religiously inspired fighters, Mujahideens. So now USA is funneling money with the help of Pakistan. All right. So there is a partnership between USA and Pakistan in supporting the Mujahideens versus USSR. So US is sending money, US is sending arms through Pakistan indirectly into Afghanistan. Why? Because it wanted to defeat USSR. So it supported Mujahideens. So Pakistan also got a lot of money. So after 1989, what you would see, if you can correlate, 1989 USSR is defeated. Where is that money? Where is that arm going? पाकिस्तान ने एक चीज सीख ली यूएस से. किसी को अगर सीधे नहीं हरा सकते हो तो फिर proxy war. So then 1989, what you would see is onwards, Pakistan started supporting terrorism and secessionism in India. Some of the money, some of the arms from the US period are there with Pakistan. So Pakistan starts diverting some of the money, some of the arms to forces inimical to India. ये US से ही सीखा पाकिस्तान ने. All right, and indirectly US is responsible for many of our problems. जैसा कुछ दिन पहले एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स मिनिस्टर ने भी कहा. बट देन इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस में आप किसी से नाराज नहीं होते हैं, है ना, ये कहते हुए कि तुमने कल ये किया था, तो ऐसा नहीं होता है. बट जनरली यू रिमेंबर फ्रॉम हिस्ट्री दिस इज व्हाट हैपेंड. नाउ 1989, so 1990s what is happening? 1990s we generally can see Afghanistan passing through instability and period of instability. Generally this is what is happening. There is a government in Kabul, but the government is not able to control entirety of Afghanistan, right? Different areas in Afghanistan are controlled by different ethnic groups. So remember, Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic country. All right, Pashtuns or Pakhtuns or Pathans, as they are colloquially called in India, is the majority in Afghanistan. But then if you look at the location of Afghanistan, you have Tajiks, you have Uzbeks, you have Hazaras. All right, these are various ethnic groups in different parts of Afghanistan. अलग अलग अफगानिस्तान के इलाकों में आप अलग अलग ethnic groups देखेंगे, right? They have some semblance of commonality, but large differences in terms of identity. So by and large, there is instability in Afghanistan. All right, you would see this is a period where Mujahideens and also various ethnic warlords. That's why it is a dangerous idea to arm any society. एक बार अगर किसी सोसाइटी में आपने हथियार और वायलेंस फैला दिया, तो फिर उसको वापस लेना मुश्किल हो जाता है. So earlier these people are fighting USSR. अब किसके लिए लड़ाई कर रहे हैं? अभी हथियार रह गया, कुछ पैसे रह गए, तो अलग अलग इलाकों में अपना fiefdom एक क्रिएट कर लिया. All right, in different parts of Afghanistan, different warlords, different ethnic leaders assert their claim. So central government is weak, central authority is weak in Afghanistan. So infighting continues. This infighting reaches a logical conclusion. There is a lot of confusion in the early 1990s, but logical conclusion, meaning where we can identify some major change happened, takes place in 1996. In 1996, the group called Taliban defeats all these powerful people. All right, a relatively unknown group. इससे पहले तालिबान के बारे में बहुत ज्यादा लोग नहीं जानते, नहीं सुना है बहुत ज्यादा, ये कहां से आ गए ये नए लोग. These are the young people who defeated powerful mercenaries, powerful ethnic warlords and their armies. कैसे, ऐसा कैसे हो सकता है? So that means that they are backed by some powerful group. So from that point in time, it is understood that Taliban has significant support of Pakistan, not US. Pakistan, not US. अभी US का कोई लेना देना नहीं है वहां से. US का जब तक लेना देना होता है तब तक वो सबको सपोर्ट करते हैं, उसके बाद they go back. All right. खैर, जड़ें तो US ने ही डाली है यहाँ पे. Now who are these Taliban? Talib has Persian origin, also is a word found in Pashto, which is the language spoken in Afghanistan. It means students. So these are the students who had studied in Pakistan's seminaries. Pakistani madrasas में पढ़े थे, Pakistani seminaries में पढ़े थे ये लोग. And these are from refugee families. When USSR invaded Afghanistan and a proxy war between USSR and different Mujahideen supported by Pakistan and USA started, millions of common people left Afghanistan and entered into Pakistan. So in areas like Peshawar, you have large refugee camps. So these are coming from those families, from refugee families. They have been students in Pakistani seminaries. So they are ideologically trained and then groomed by the state actors like the intelligence agency ISI in Pakistan. So then Taliban backed by Pakistan emerges as the most important actor, most powerful actor in Afghanistan. This is something that remains the case till 2001. 2001. Till 2001, Afghanistan witnesses the rule of Taliban. Taliban knew how to fight, but they don't exactly know how to run a state. So they wanted to impose their own version of religious rule on Afghanistan. हर किसी का अपना अपना idea होता है कि what does religion say. So in that particular period, you would see regressive social policies like women's education receives a setback. A woman can't go out of home without a male relative, those kinds of rules. Males are dictated to grow their beards. Music is banned. Cricket is banned. And most importantly, Afghanistan at that point in time had important Buddhist relics. So the Taliban is responsible for the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddha. So when I was a student, when I studied NCERT in my schools, I was always fascinated by the large carvings at Bamiyan. वो NCERT के अंदर आपको दिखाया जाता था Bamiyan के अंदर बुद्धा की का statue on the mountain side. But then I also remember, I clearly remember when in 2001 they destroyed it, it became news. All right. So destruction of Bamiyan Buddhas. This is basically the legacy of the Taliban period. For India, what is important in this particular period? 1999. IC-814. IC-814 क्या है? Is an Indian Airlines plane. It flies from Kathmandu. Kathmandu से उड़ा and then it is hijacked mid-air. It landed in Amritsar for a short while. It went to UAE. वहाँ पे उतरने की अनुमति नहीं मिली and then it went to Kandahar. So the hijackers took Indian plane to Kandahar. IC-814 वो plane था. And then they demanded that certain terrorists who have been arrested and are in Indian jails be released in return, in exchange for the lives of the civilians who were on the plane. One of the passengers was killed and ultimately India released people like Masood Azhar. All right, Masood Azhar really was in Indian jail. Now it was released at that point in time. So at this point in time also we realized that Taliban controlling Afghanistan is not in India's interest. We realize that Taliban and Pakistan have close linkages. So from this period, we understand that a policy continued, which was India was not willing to engage with Taliban in any ways. In this particular period, in the 1990s till 1996, in the infighting between various factions in Afghanistan, India had supported a group called Northern Alliance. Northern Alliance was the main adversary of Taliban. So India had supported Northern Alliance. So for various reasons now we understand from this period a certain distance from Taliban is part of India's policy. Opposition to Taliban is also part of India's policy. Why? Because we understand that Taliban's rule is detrimental not only to the social fabric of Afghanistan but also to the interests of India. Alright, Taliban is closely aligned with Pakistan. तो ये legacy issue है, यहाँ से हमारा view तालिबान के बारे में बनता है. That it is not in our interest. 2001. So what happens in 2001? Now look at how developments in different parts of the world are interrelated. 2001. We have what the Americans call 9/11 or September 11 attacks. So prominently you have places like World Trade Center in New York is blown up. The Defense Department headquartered in US Pentagon building is attacked. So this is the first attack on US soil after the Pearl Harbor attacks of the Second World War. पहली बार US में इस तरह का कोई अटैक होता है. Around more than 3,000 people lose their lives. So this is a very audacious attack. Again, I was a student at that point in time. I remember looking at television and the headlines was America under attack. And that was quite phenomenal because America till then was considered to be very safe, separated by Pacific Ocean and Atlantic Ocean from any of its adversaries. So American soil पे कोई attack होना बहुत ही असंभव सी बात थी. But then America is attacked and this terrorist attack is linked with a group called Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is led by Osama bin Laden, सबको पता है. All right, and Mr. Osama bin Laden was fighting against the USSR during 1979 to 1989 period. And he was one of the fighters promoted by USA and Pakistan in fight against USSR. Now the position changes. Al-Qaeda's demands were that America withdraws its troops from the Arabian soil. Arabian countries में जो US के forces हैं उनको withdraw करना चाहिए. ये one of the prominent demand था किसका? Al-Qaeda का. And Al-Qaeda was willing to engage in violence for these kinds of demands. So Al-Qaeda is a terrorist organization which emerges prominently in the 1990s. 1999 में they had taken responsibility of attacks on certain consulates of US. For example, in Kenya, in East Africa, they had conducted some attacks. So at that point in time, US had conducted missile attacks. But the threat grew and many of the Americans were surprised that how did this happen? So they could not prevent this attack. Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is based in Afghanistan. Its leadership at that point in time is based in Afghanistan. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Osama bin Laden, all these people are in Afghanistan. So, and have close ties with Taliban. So the Americans then at that point in time respond and they basically launch a series of operations generally called Global War on Terror. Global War on Terror is launched by America. Various phases of its operations, enduring freedom, etc. And the first theater, कहाँ पहली बार जाते हैं अमेरिका वाले बदला लेने के लिए? Afghanistan. The first theater of global war on terror is Afghanistan. And then later on, Iraq. है ना? उस समय के दो wars बहुत ही prominent है. One is Afghanistan, another is Iraq. So this is basically part of America's global war on terror. So at that point in time, we said, okay, when we were saying terrorism is a problem, you did not hear. Now when you are attacked, you realize the seriousness of the problem. So at that point in time, again you would see Pakistan's location becomes important. If America has to conduct any military operation, long-standing military operation in Afghanistan, it needs supplies. Supply line maintain करना पड़ेगा अपने troops को. कहाँ से करेंगे? So then the ports of Pakistan like Karachi become important, and then the infrastructure in Pakistan becomes important to supply the forces in Afghanistan. So America launches, first America asks Taliban to hand over the leadership of Al-Qaeda. So Taliban says no, it is against the Afghan code of honor. They are our guests. We are not going to hand them over. So America said then it's fine, we are coming. To Pakistan, America said that if you don't support us, we would bomb you to Stone Age. Alright, there was a American official called Richard Armitage. थोड़ा पहलवान टाइप के दिखते हैं. So he went to Pakistan. At that point in time, Pervez Musharraf was the ruler in Pakistan. वहाँ पे अमेरिका का कहना है, ऐसा कई लोगों ने लिखा है कि रिचर्ड आर्मिटेज ने परवेज मुशर्रफ से कहा कि अगर आप हमारा सपोर्ट नहीं करते तो we will bomb you to Stone Age. Alright. So then Pakistan also changes. Pakistan says it supports global war on terrorism. Pakistan distances itself from Taliban. और उसी पीरियड में ध्यान दो क्या शुरू होता है? इंडिया और पाकिस्तान के बीच में कंपोजिट डायलॉग प्रोसेस. सारी चीजें जुड़ी हुई है आपस में, है ना? पाकिस्तान सेज हम टेररिज्म के खिलाफ लड़ाई करेंगे और परवेज मुशर्रफ gives a speech. America then is also convincing Pakistan to enter into some form of negotiation with India. तो दुनिया में जब चीजें चेंज होती है, सर्कमस्टांस, कॉन्टेक्स्ट इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट, नॉट द पर्सन, है ना। ये इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन सुपरमैन और सुपर वुमेन के बारे में नहीं है कि कोई एक आया बंदा उसने जो है चीजों को बदल के रख दिया. एवरीबडी इज अ पॉन in the course of history. Everybody is playing their own role. Parvez Musharraf was very important. Parvez Musharraf now is nowhere. All right. George W. Bush was the president of the United States. Launched global war on terror. इतने अमेरिकन सोल्जर्स मरे. आखिर में 2020-21 में अमेरिका को वापस जाना पड़ा अफगानिस्तान से. Nobody would ask a question कि इतने लोगों को क्यों फिर मरने दिया यार. What is the result? What is the result? Ultimately 2001 you displaced Afghanistan. 2021 20 साल बाद you yourself brought Afghanistan to power. All right. Taliban to power. All right. Now global war on terror, first theater is Afghanistan. So then within 3 months America starts bombing Afghanistan. Within 3 months it destroys Afghanistan. It destroys the leadership of Al-Qaeda, it destroys the leadership of Taliban in terms of those people who were holding on to positions of power. So Taliban is displaced from power. Taliban को आपने हटा दिया, अब क्या बदले में, क्या उसकी जगह पे क्या आना चाहिए? So that is the difficult question. कहीं पे मिलिट्री बेस देना तो आसान काम है, आपके पास बॉम्ब है, आपने बॉम्ब गिरा दिया, उसके बाद क्या? After bombing what? So that is a difficult task, right? So first of all, there is a force called ISAF, International Security Assistance Force, is created to basically ensure security and stability in Afghanistan. All right, International Security and Assistance Force. It has the backing of the UN also, but majorly its operations are, or the forces are coming from NATO, US. So UN mandated है ये force, ISAF, International Security and Assistance Force, but कहाँ से आ रहा है? Forces कहाँ से आ रहे हैं? NATO, United States. All right, because US wanted to fight. अगर UN नहीं भी कहता कि नहीं आपको वहाँ नहीं जाना चाहिए, तब भी US जाता, right? So that is basically what happens in international relations. Great powers have their own way of doing things. So ISAF is created. ISAF basically takes over the responsibility of ensuring security in Afghanistan. Now comes up the process of building up politics in Afghanistan, state building. So for that you would find the process is by 2004 Afghanistan adopts a new constitution. All right. There is a traditional assembly called Loya Zirga in Afghanistan, assembly of elders that comes together, and then they formulate a new constitution. And then by 2005 you have a new president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai. Hamid Karzai becomes the president of Afghanistan around 2005 with American support. Now Hamid Karzai is Western educated and also educated in India. All right, Hamid Karzai had studied in places like Pune, in places like Shimla. So he had an Indian connection. Hamid Karzai. He belongs to the Pashtun group. Pashtun, Pathans are the majority in Afghanistan. So generally, by and large, we see that after the first phase of global war on terror, when Taliban is displaced from power, the second phase is about ensuring security and stability in Afghanistan and state building. All right. So ISAF, International Security and Assistance Force, is responsible for maintaining security in Afghanistan, and then simultaneously the efforts of building a state government in Afghanistan also continue. So we have the constitution of Afghanistan, and then we have appointment of a president, Hamid Karzai, in Afghanistan. So this is something that by and large continues. Now in this period what you would see, what happens is that there is George W. Bush wins elections, and then there is continuity of presidency in US. So तब तक तो policy ठीक है. 2008 what happens? Who becomes the president of United States? Barack Obama. Now there was a significant domestic opposition to America's global war on terror within United States. Democracies के अंदर ये होता है, यही नहीं होता कि केवल एक ने एक बात कह दी तो वही है राष्ट्रहित, नहीं. In US also there was significant opposition to the decision to go to Iraq or Afghanistan. All right. So President Obama, who was a Democrat, came to power and he had opposed the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. पर देखो, foreign policy is that of states, not individuals. So that is why you would see foreign policy abruptly change नहीं हो जाती है कि कोई पावर में आया उसने एक दिन में सब चेंज कर दिया, ऐसा नहीं होता है. So even though President Obama opposed this war, he continued because America had invested a lot. Now it would have been a reversal. So he continued on the project that his predecessor had started, but he was opposed to the war. So by 2011, US announces that International Security and Assistance Force would be withdrawing from Afghanistan, would be completing its operations. So basically, this is where you would see the conversation on the future of Afghanistan starts. What would happen if there is no international security support to Afghanistan? है ना, क्या अफगानिस्तान बिना इंटरनेशनल सिक्योरिटी सपोर्ट के सर्वाइव कर सकता है? So that is the question, that is a serious question. But US announces that it would be A, scaling down its own operations, and B, ISAF would be completing its operations in Afghanistan. So this happens in 2014. ISAF withdraws. International Security and Assistance Force withdraws from Afghanistan. है ना, largely जो forces हैं, international forces, they start withdrawing from Afghanistan. Right? So this is a process that continued. America retained its forces in Afghanistan, but now America started redefining its role. America said that its forces would remain in Afghanistan in a supporting role. They would provide training and support to Afghan National Defense Forces. Afghanistan के अंदर एक मिलिट्री क्रिएट हुई, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट सारी चीजें बनने लगी तो मिलिट्री भी बनी. So now America said that our forces would be in training and support role to Afghan National Defense Forces. But reduction in American forces had already started. America retained forces, but reduction in numbers had already started. So by 2014, one important component of international forces, ISAF, had completed its operations. Right? Now what happens? 2018, we have the Afghan government proposal for talks to Taliban. Afghan government says, let's talk. You give up arms, let's have ceasefire, and we will talk. Taliban says, no, thank you. We are not interested. So in all this period, what you would see is, initially Taliban is defeated. The process of state building, process of institution building in Afghanistan remains a difficult process, challenging process. There is corruption, there is ethnic rivalry, all right? And thereby what you would see is gradually Taliban had started regrouping. Taliban, अब Taliban को क्या चाहिए भाई? Taliban is not a traditional military, all right? So Taliban needed support of people. So Taliban had started mobilizing support. और आर्म्स तो आ ही रहा है भाई, साइड में पाकिस्तान है, कुछ आर्म्स जो है वो कॉम्बैट के दौरान वो छीन लेते हैं, so on and so forth. So gradually Taliban had started regrouping. By 2018, it was very clear that Taliban is strong in Afghanistan. Taliban from that point in time, if you see the maps will show you that government controls urban areas. शहरों के आसपास सरकार मजबूत है, but when it comes to hinterland of Afghanistan, villages, rural areas, Taliban had started becoming strong. Right? So Taliban said no. And now, who is the president in the United States? President Donald Trump. So Donald Trump के साथ आप एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं कुछ drastic. जैसा मैंने कहा कि भाई even Obama was opposed to the war, but he did not decide it in one day. All right. Now, Donald Trump had come with a promise, election promise, that we will bring the boys home. All right. Our boys will not lay down their lives or would not die in Afghanistan. We'll bring the boys home. This is a very common saying in American politics, bringing the boys home. So, ट्रूप विड्रॉल वाज वन ऑफ द इलेक्शन प्रोमिसेस ऑफ डोनाल्ड ट्रंप. उन्होंने प्रॉमिस किया था, वादा किया था इलेक्शन में कि मैं आऊंगा तो मैं क्या करूंगा, मैं सारी चीजें चेंज कर दूंगा. आई विल मेक अमेरिका ग्रेट अगेन. मेक अमेरिका ग्रेट अगेन. बी दैट एज इट मे. सेंस प्रिवेल्ड. सो देखो, even though Donald Trump wanted to withdraw forces, but initially, at least for the first 2 years, he listened to his Secretary of Defense, मिलिट्री वालों की, इंटेलिजेंस वालों की बात सुनी, तो उन्होंने रोक लिया ट्रूप विड्रॉल से. थोड़ा सा ट्रूप बढ़ाया भी बीच में, बिकॉज तालिबान वायलेंस हैड इंक्रीज्ड. बट देन कितने दिन तक आप डोनाल्ड ट्रंप को रोक सकते हैं? डोनाल्ड ट्रंप फायर्ड अ लॉट ऑफ हिज डिफेंस सेक्रेटरीज ऑफ स्टेट, अपने मंत्रियों को, ये लो भाई, आज यू आर फायर्ड, तुम जाओ, घर जाओ. Unpredictable figure. So by 2018 it was clear that Taliban is strong, the Afghan government is weak, it would require external support, and the Americans are changing their mind. So 2016 to 18 forces, American forces continued, increased also in numbers in Afghanistan, but 2018 it was very clear that America is not inclined to continue. अमेरिका के पास अब विल नहीं है कंटिन्यू करने का. तो ये तो सिग्नल था तालिबान को कि भाई बस कुछ दिन की बात है, उसके बाद तो हम आ जाएंगे. सो देन व्हाट हैपेंड वाज, बाय 2018 तालिबान आल्सो स्टार्टेड मेकिंग अटेम्प्ट्स टू इंगेज विद द अमेरिकन्स. अमेरिकन अखबारों में फुल पेज का वो दिया, एड दिया. उन्होंने कहा कि तुमसे हमारी कोई दुश्मनी नहीं है, वी डोंट हैव एनी प्रॉब्लम विद द अमेरिकन्स, वी ओनली वांट यू टू विड्रॉ फ्रॉम द अफगान टेरिटरी. ऑल राइट. क्योंकि तालिबान को लगता था कि ये तो एक बार अमेरिकन चले जाएंगे, उसके बाद तो हम सबको देख लेंगे. ऑल राइट. दे डिड नॉट कंसिडर द गवर्नमेंट टू बी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. दे कॉल्ड द गवर्नमेंट अ स्टूज ऑफ द अमेरिकन्स, द वेस्टर्न फोर्सेस. Be that as it may, but this is a period in which you see some sort of change is happening, some sort of anxiety is there. What would happen to Afghanistan? What is the future of Afghanistan? Right? So then by 2019, the Americans announced that they would be engaging with Taliban. All right. So US engages Taliban in dialogue starting with 2019. 2018 में ही ये छपने लगा था कि ऐसा कुछ होने वाला है, but 2019 the dialogue was announced that the Americans and the Talibanis would have some sort of a dialogue. Right? Now this dialogue continues 2018, 2019. 2019 is a period in which it seemed that there would be a peace agreement between US and Taliban. In the month of September 2019, it was announced that the US would be inviting the Talibani delegation to Washington. है ना? किसी ने डोनाल्ड ट्रंप को सलाह नहीं दी कि भाई 9/11 के हफ्ते में आप अगर तालिबान से मिलोगे तो that would not be a good optics. But still, what happened is that there is a bomb blast in Afghanistan. One American soldier dies. So then Donald Trump says, no, I'm not talking. We are not talking. The talks are off. America अब तालिबान से बात नहीं करेगा. Well, in the month of September में ये कहा, फिर नवंबर में अफगानिस्तान चले गए, क्रिसमस मनाया वहाँ पे, early Christmas with the soldiers. And then he said that we are talking. हम बात कर रहे हैं. है ना? तो ये बहुत ही इंस्टेबिलिटी का पीरियड है जिसमें आपको पता नहीं चल रहा है क्या होने वाला है, क्या हो सकता है. पर ये बहुत ही क्लियर है कि अफगानिस्तान में कुछ बड़ा हो सकता है. सो दिस ऑन एंड ऑफ डायलॉग देन रिजल्ट्स इन अ एग्रीमेंट. देयर इज एन एग्रीमेंट साइंड बिटवीन तालिबान एंड द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स इन February 2020. February 2020 में क्या हुआ? एक एग्रीमेंट साइन किया तालिबान और यूएस ने. इस एग्रीमेंट में बेसिकली क्या डिसाइड हुआ? वन टाइमलाइन ऑफ यूएस ट्रूप विड्रॉल. ऑलराइट, बहुत ही शरीफ लोगों की तरह अमेरिका ने एकदम क्लियरली कहा कि अब हम यहां से अपने फोर्सेस को ले जाएंगे. टाइम टेबल भी पूरा बनाया कि हाँ 3 महीने में इतना, 3 महीने में इतना, उसके बाद कंप्लीट विड्रॉल करेंगे. तो अमेरिका ने यह बता दिया. उसके बाद दूसरा जो चीज तय हुई वो था प्रिजनर एक्सचेंज. तालिबान ने कहा कि भाई दोस्ती चाहते हैं आप, यू वांट पीस, यू वांट फ्रेंडशिप, वी वुड बी फ्रेंड्स, रिलीज दोज तालिबान हु आर इन अफगान जेल्स. लगभग 25,000, 25,000 तालिबान फाइटर्स वर इन अफगान जेल्स. अफगान गवर्नमेंट इज सेइंग दैट इतनी मुश्किल से इनको पकड़ा है, छोड़ना नहीं चाहिए. बट अब अमेरिका से दोस्ती कर ली थी तालिबान ने, राइट? सो प्रिजनर एक्सचेंज इज अनदर थिंग दैट इज डिटरमिन्ड इन दिस पर्टिकुलर डायलॉग. एंड देन it is also decided that there would be an intra-Afghan dialogue. And then तालिबान ने क्या दिया भाई, इन सारी चीजों में तो मिल किसको रहा है? तालिबान को. तालिबान बेनिफिट्स, अमेरिका विड्रॉ कर लेगा तो हम ताकतवर है. प्रिजनर एक्सचेंज, लॉट ऑफ आवर फाइटर्स वुड बी रिलीज्ड. एंड देन इंट्रा अफगान डायलॉग, कोई मतलब नहीं है इस चीज का, ये तो बस एम्प्टी प्रॉमिस है. और फिर तालिबान से बदले में अमेरिका क्या लेता है? Yes, so counter terror guarantees, सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेशन देता है तालिबान. सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेशन कि अब से हम शराफत से पेश आएंगे एंड वी वुड नॉट बी अटैकिंग. क्या काउंटर टेररिज्म गारंटी है? सिंपली मतलब तालिबान कहता है कि वी वुड नॉट अटैक और नॉट अलाउ अटैक अगेंस्ट यूएस एंड इट्स अलाइज. ऑलराइट, यूएस एंड इट्स अलाइज, यूएस और उसके दोस्तों, यूएस के ट्रूप्स जो है अफगानिस्तान में, उनके खिलाफ कोई अटैक ना हम करेंगे ना हम सपोर्ट करेंगे. दिस इज व्हाट द काउंटर टेरर गारंटी ऑफ द तालिबान इज. खुद से सर्टिफिकेट दे दिया कि नहीं 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 हम शरीफ हो जाएंगे आज से, राइट? सो दिस इज व्हाट इज हैपनिंग. दिस वाज वेरी फ्लॉड फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग. आइडियली क्या होना चाहिए था? आइडियली होना चाहिए था फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल सीज फायर, स्टॉप वायलेंस. ड्यूरिंग द होल negotiation period violence continues, bombing continues, civilians are dying. तालिबान अपना जहां मर्जी वहां पे अटैक किए जा रहा है जैसे भी पॉसिबल है उसके लिए. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल देयर शुड हैव बीन अ सीज फायर एंड देन इंट्रा अफगान डायलॉग. आइडियली ये होना चाहिए था. देन इंट्रा अफगान डायलॉग, ये होना चाहिए था प्रोसेस. एंड देन अ कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव पीस एग्रीमेंट. Right? Ceasefire, ensure that Taliban is not involved in violence, and then after that support intra-Afghan dialogue, ideally under the Afghan government. Afghan government should be the representative of the Afghan people. क्योंकि आपने इतने साल तो इस सरकार को सपोर्ट किया, you helped in the development of this government. अब आप अचानक से इस सरकार को कोई इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं दे रहे, तो ये तो मजाक हो गया. So there should have been an intra-Afghan dialogue, and then intra-Afghan dialogue के बाद एक comprehensive peace agreement होना चाहिए था. All right, tripartite हो जाता between Taliban, Afghanistan government and the US. But this is not something that happened. Right? Expectation ये थी, हुआ ये. Timeline of US withdrawal is very clear that US would be withdrawing by 2021. There would be no US forces in Afghanistan. It is very clear that there would be a prisoner exchange. It is very clear that intra-Afghan dialogue is not going to be very significant. नाम के लिए केवल होगा. और काउंटर टेरर गारंटी दे दी तालिबान ने कि हम अमेरिका और उसके एलाइज के अगेंस्ट अटैक नहीं होने देंगे. राइट? सो देन what happens is after that in 2020 September 2020 September, what happens is American troop withdrawal timeline is already there. Prisoner exchange already has happened by September. Afghan government ने काफी resist किया कि prisoner exchange should not happen because that would release 25,000 Taliban fighters who have been arrested with difficulty. मुश्किल से जिनको पकड़ा उनको छोड़ना नहीं चाहिए, ये अफगान गवर्नमेंट का कहना था. Be that as it may, it took time, and by September, prisoner exchange was completed. Taliban released 1,000 prisoners, and Afghan government released 25,000 prisoners. 1,000 prisoners में कुछ Indians भी थे, 3-4 Indians जिनको abduct किया था तालिबान ने, those were also released. So be that as it may, ये in September 2020, what we see is intra-Afghan talks start where? At Doha. Doha, the capital of Qatar. Here intra-Afghan talks start. So Afghan government, Afghan civil society and Taliban are sitting for the first time on the same table. क्या importance है इसका? Well, ultimately the idea, anyone would have the idea that the future of Afghanistan should be decided by Afghan people. So at the level of principles it is okay. But practically, Taliban now has no reason to compromise with the Afghan government or anyone else in Afghanistan. No reason. क्योंकि अमेरिकन्स ने तो पता है तालिबान को कि अमेरिकन्स तो चले ही जाएंगे, तो थोड़ी दिन की बस बात है, right? And then the government in United States changes, right? Joe Biden comes to power. Now Biden administration is also committed to. They don't like Donald Trump, but they are committed to withdrawal. Withdraw करना है, withdrawal को नहीं रोकना है, ये इनकी तरफ से तय था. तो Biden administration also continued with withdrawal, but then the withdrawal became mismanaged. Mismanaged withdrawal, and then you would find Taliban finding the opportunity, and it basically then goes on offensive. Taliban offensive. Taliban starts one by one capturing provincial capitals. है ना? जो राज्य अफगानिस्तान के थे उनके कैपिटल्स, पावर सेंटर्स को तालिबान ने कैप्चर करना शुरू कर दिया कि तुम अमेरिकन रोक सकते हो तो रोक लो, बाकी तो कोई रोक नहीं सकता. उनको पता है अमेरिकन जा रहे हैं. So they started making their offensive, and ultimately in August 2021 they capture Kabul. National capital भी capture कर लिया, and then within minutes the Afghan government collapses. All right, Afghan President Mr. Ashraf Ghani flies away from Afghanistan. There is some sort of resistance to Taliban rule in some parts of Afghanistan, but that is also not strong enough this time. So then Taliban, for all practical purposes, conquers power. You have videos of President Biden. उनसे पूछते हैं कि भाई आपको लगता है कि तालिबान पावर कैप्चर कर लेगा? उन्होंने कहा नहीं, there is no such possibility. So either the Americans failed to actually determine what would happen as a result of withdrawal, or they knew and they chose to ignore the reality. So Taliban now is in power. अब आप क्या कर लेंगे? आपने तो withdraw कर लिया, वापस troops भेजेंगे? नहीं, ऐसा नहीं होगा. But then now the question is of the recognition of Taliban government. Taliban announces a cabinet also. Taliban ने अपना cabinet announce किया, prime minister announce किया. तालिबान की कैबिनेट में ऐसे बहुत सारे इंडिविजुअल्स हैं who are sanctioned by the Americans, sanctioned by the UN as terrorists. So this is an interesting situation. But the idea is, let's see what the Taliban does. अब तो ये practical situation आ गई यहाँ पे. अब आइडिया ये है कि अब तालिबान क्या करता है, इस पे चीजें डिपेंड करेंगी. All right? So that is something that we are witnessing right now. Practical scenario in which Taliban is in power in Afghanistan. There is no question about that. There is no strong opposition to Taliban. That is the practical scenario in Afghanistan. Internationally, Taliban government's recognition is questionable. Most of the countries don't recognize Taliban government in Afghanistan, but maintain practical engagements with the Taliban government. And what about who is the biggest loser in all this? The Afghan people. The Afghan people. Right? Humanitarian crisis, health crisis, food crisis. पावर में कौन है, इससे लोगों को बहुत ज्यादा मतलब नहीं होता. सबसे पहले आता है रोटी, कपड़ा, मकान, है ना? उसके बाद फिर you start discussing about the ideology. So Afghan people find themselves in lurch again. दोज हु सपोर्टेड प्रीवियस गवर्नमेंट वो अपनी जान बचाते हुए भाग रहे हैं, है ना. दोज who had started or established some businesses, started working, they have seen destruction of their livelihoods, and then COVID-19 pandemic hit. So there is no government. अब COVID-19 के दौरान जब हम सभी लोग लॉकडाउन करके अपनी जान बचा रहे थे, अफगानिस्तान के अंदर क्या हो रहा था? फाइटिंग गोइंग ऑन, गवर्नमेंट इन ट्रांजिशन. सो बेसिकली you see the biggest losers in the sense of detrimental effects are the Afghan people. And of course you can call, ये बोलने में आपको अच्छा लगेगा कि यूएस इज ऑल्सो द लूजर, पर यूएस से कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, है ना. वो चले गए, वो आए और वो चले गए. बी दैट एज इट में, ये कहानी है आज तक की. अब इस कहानी के बाद हमको क्या करना है? हमको इंडिया अफगानिस्तान रिलेशंस, कहानी लोगों को सुनने में बहुत अच्छा लगता है ना. खासतौर पे दो चार लोगों को अगर आप क्रिटिसाइज कर दो तो लोगों को और भी अच्छा लगता है. जैसे आजकल फैशन चल रहा है अमेरिका को क्रिटिसाइज करने का. आज से 1 साल पहले अमेरिका हमारा बेस्ट फ्रेंड होना चाहिए था, है ना. आज से 1 साल पहले जो तैयारी कर रहे होंगे, तो रशिया वॉर के बाद से नैरेटिव चेंज हो गया है. नैरेटिव्स कीप ऑन चेंजिंग, बट द बेसिक इज दिस: देयर आर नो फ्री लंचेस इन वॉशिंगटन. फ्री में कुछ नहीं होता लाइफ में, फ्री में कुछ नहीं होता इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस में, फ्री में कोई आपके लिए कुछ नहीं करता. देयर आर नो परमानेंट एनिमीज, देयर आर नो परमानेंट फ्रेंड्स, देयर आर ओनली परमानेंट इंटरेस्ट. परमानेंट नेबर्स तो हो गया भाई, परमानेंट इंटरेस्ट, है ना. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि सेल्फ हेल्प वर्ल्ड है. द वर्ल्ड इज अ सेल्फ हेल्प वर्ल्ड. अपनी मदद खुद करो, फिर दूसरों की मदद कर पाओगे. और बेस्ट फ्रेंड वाली कोई बात नहीं है यहाँ पे. और किसी को दुश्मन मानना भी एक तरह की रिजिडिटी है. ऑलराइट, रिजिडिटी इन योर स्टैंस, राइट. नाउ लुकिंग एट all the story, we can say that India and Afghanistan, क्या कह सकते हैं हम इस रिलेशन के बारे में? India and Afghanistan have cultural and civilizational connect. India and Afghanistan have what? Cultural and civilizational connect. ये simply कह सकते हैं हम. Going back to the ancient period, you can talk about the Gandhara art, all right. You can talk about the medieval period in which Afghans are part of many of the militaries of Indian rulers or part of the courts of Indian rulers. In the modern period, the Britishers formulated the policy of Afghanistan being a buffer state, है ना. तो from in every phase you have cultural and civilizational connect. So for example, in the modern period, what is cultural civilizational connect? Have you heard of a story called Kabuliwala? Kabuliwala, a story written by Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore had written a story called Kabuliwala. It is about a Pathan. All right. So whatever your image of a Pathan or Pashtun or Pakhtun is, basically part of that cultural connect. All right. Then the location of Afghanistan is an important factor in this relation. ये भी हम कह सकते हैं आराम से. All right. कैसे? Now open it up. Afghanistan is a part of South Asia. Afghanistan and India share borders. बॉर्डर कहां पे शेयर करते हैं हम? अफगानिस्तान का एक इलाका है जिसको कहते हैं वाखान कॉरिडोर. वाखान कॉरिडोर इज वेयर इंडियाज स्मॉलेस्ट लैंड बॉर्डर विद अफगानिस्तान लाइज. चाइना का भी यहां पे बॉर्डर है. सो वाखान कॉरिडोर इज वेयर ऑल्सो यू हैव स्मॉलेस्ट लैंड बॉर्डर ऑफ चाइना. इंडिया और चाइना का स्मॉलेस्ट लैंड बॉर्डर एक ही जगह पे है अफगानिस्तान के साथ, वाखान कॉरिडोर में. ऑलराइट. सो वाखान कॉरिडोर, शेयर्ड बॉर्डर्स. नाउ यू कैन ऑल्सो से जियो स्ट्रैटेजिक लोकेशन. अफगानिस्तान की लोकेशन is of interest to multiple foreign policies. When we say geostrategy, what it means is geographic direction of a foreign policy in simple terms. Meaning, if a location is of interest to multiple powers, we can say that that location is geostrategically significant. किसी जियोग्राफी में अगर इंडिया के फॉरेन पॉलिसी, इंडिया के फ्यूचर का इंटरेस्ट है, तो हम उसको क्या कह सकते हैं? जियो स्ट्रैटेजिक सिग्निफिकेंस है इंडिया के लिए उस चीज का. सो जियो स्ट्रैटेजिक लोकेशन इन व्हाट सेंस? Afghanistan is the entry point to Central Asia. It shares a border with Pakistan. It shares a border with Iran. It shares a border with China. All right, Central Asia तो हमने कह दिया. अब अफगानिस्तान को अगर आप देखो तो एक तरफ पाकिस्तान है, साउथ एशिया, एक तरफ सेंट्रल एशिया के देश हैं, तुर्कमेनिस्तान, उज्बेकिस्तान. दीज आर द कंट्रीज शेयरिंग बॉर्डर विद अफगानिस्तान. सेंट्रल एशिया. दूसरी तरफ ईरान फ्रॉम वेस्ट एशिया. तीसरी तरफ चाइना. ऑल राइट. सो बेसिकली अफगानिस्तान इज एट द क्रॉस रोड्स ऑफ मल्टीपल रीजन्स. It can be seen as an important transit location connecting various regions. So that's why its location is geostrategically significant. Its location is geostrategic in terms of interest of the foreign policy of countries. So it's an important factor. Location is an important factor. Apart from that, the other factor which makes the relationship is important is Pakistan-Afghanistan equations, whereby I hope you have understood that Pakistan and Afghanistan continue to have differences over territorial issues. Pakistan and Afghanistan continue to have differences over territorial issues. Number one. Number two, Pakistan has consistently wanted to control the politics of Afghanistan. All right. Pakistan has consistently wanted to control the politics of Afghanistan because it views Afghanistan from the prism of strategic depth. All right. Pakistan का एक आइडिया है कि अफगानिस्तान provides it strategic depth. So Pakistan, that's why, as we said, Pakistan has consistently tried to control the politics of Afghanistan because it views Afghanistan from the prism of strategic depth. What does it mean? It simply means, देखो strategic depth का आइडिया इस्तेमाल करना अफगानिस्तान के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में थोड़ा सा it doesn't make sense, but Pakistan continuously does that. So suppose if this is India, this is Pakistan, this is Afghanistan. Pakistan thinks that Afghanistan provides it geographical expanse which can be used for defensive military purposes. Right? So India is a large country. हम बड़े देश में रहते हैं. तो कई बार बड़े देश में जब हम रहते हैं तो हम छोटे देशों की इनसिक्योरिटी नहीं समझ पाते हैं. If suppose there is a military offensive, Indian military can run over the territory of Pakistan in a short time, hypothetically speaking. Of course, there would be resistance. But geographically speaking, if you see the space, territorial space for fighting is narrower in Pakistan. है ना? Pakistan छोटा देश है. तो कोई भी military can run over the entire breadth of Pakistan easily. तो पाकिस्तान का कहना है कि जब अगर ऐसा हो जाएगा, ऐसी कोई सिचुएशन होगी जिसमें इंडिया कंट्रोल कर ले पाकिस्तान को, तो हम कहां से लड़ाई करेंगे? हम अफगानिस्तान चले जाएंगे, यहां से हम लड़ाई करेंगे. ऑलराइट, ये हमको स्ट्रेटेजिक डेप्थ प्रोवाइड करता है. इट वुड हेल्प अस इन रीग्रुपिंग, इट वुड हेल्प अस इन लॉन्चिंग एन ऑफेंसिव अगेंस्ट इंडिया इन द फेस ऑफ अ ग्रेव और सीरियस मिलिट्री थ्रेट whereby Indian armed forces have run over the territory of Pakistan. All right. तो ये इंडिया के अंदर हम कभी नहीं सोचते because we have a significantly larger territorial expanse. पर फिर भी इंडिया के कुछ इलाकों में हम ऐसा सोचते हैं. ऐसा कौन सा इलाका है जहां पे ये narrowness of territory becomes important? The link between India and mainland India and northeastern states. The Siliguri corridor. है ना. वहां पे अगर आप देखोगे तो बेसिक कंसिडरेशन यही है कि इफ एनी मिलिट्री वांट्स टू चोक ऑफ दिस कनेक्ट, द टाइम रिक्वायर्ड इज गोइंग टू बी लेस. तो ये बेसिक आइडिया है. स्ट्रेटेजिक डेप्थ के हिसाब से देखते हैं, मतलब कि हमारा बैकयार्ड है. अफगानिस्तान इज आवर स्ट्रेटेजिक बैकयार्ड. वी कैन रीग्रुप देयर, वी कैन लॉन्च आवर ऑफेंसिस अगेंस्ट इंडिया फ्रॉम अफगानिस्तान. ये मूर्खता वाला आइडिया है बेसिकली, क्योंकि आप अपनी पूरी की पूरी टेरिटरी को छोड़ के दूसरे देश से लड़ने की सोच रहे हैं. इंडिया के अंदर अगर हम स्ट्रेटेजिक डेप्थ की बात करें तो हमारे पास थार डेजर्ट है. आर पॉपुलेशन सेंटर्स आर अवे फ्रॉम द थार डेजर्ट. सो थार डेजर्ट प्रोवाइड्स अस स्ट्रेटेजिक डेप्थ कि हम लड़ाई लड़ सकते हैं थार डेजर्ट में. हमारा पॉपुलेशन सेंटर्स, हमारे इंडस्ट्रियल सेंटर्स आर अवे फ्रॉम द मेन एरिया ऑफ फाइटिंग. तो वहां पे हमको स्ट्रेटेजिक डेप्थ टेरिटरी दे रही है थार डेजर्ट. पर हम अपना देश छोड़ के बांग्लादेश जाने की बात नहीं सोच रहे. बट पाकिस्तान basically because of its own territorial configuration, development of its own military thinking, has been looking at Afghanistan from the perspective of strategic depth. मतलब किराए का घर, right? So basically ये तीसरा फैक्टर है, पाकिस्तान फैक्टर, which makes this relationship important. इसमें हम जोड़ सकते हैं पाकिस्तान सपोर्ट टू Taliban. So Pakistan's support to Taliban has been a part of India's security calculation, that if Taliban and Pakistan are strong in Afghanistan, it is against India's interests. In what sense? So for that we can make it the next point. Location, Pakistan factor को combine करके हम कह सकते हैं security wise. It's a long held view that an unstable Afghanistan is detrimental. An unstable Afghanistan is detrimental to India's interests. In what sense? किस तरह से unstable Afghanistan is detrimental to India's interest? नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पर्सपेक्टिव तो एक लाइन हो गई, और डिटेल में कोई नॉन स्टेट एक्टर्स और कोई. सो वन, द पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ अफगान सॉइल बीइंग यूज्ड फॉर टेररिस्ट recruitment and training. It is very evident that groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed, groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Pakistan-based groups, have used Afghan soil for their training camps, also for recruitment of youth in terrorist activities. So it is basically well received idea that an unstable Afghanistan, if Afghanistan is unstable, what happens is its territory, different parts of Afghanistan become conducive for terrorist training ground, becoming terrorist training ground and terrorist recruitment grounds. ये होता है. और दूसरा, since territory is close by, it is always considered that there may be a spillover effect in regions like Jammu and Kashmir. Many a times people from Afghanistan have been arrested. They have, with the support of Pakistan, infiltrated across the LOC, and some of them have been responsible in promoting terrorism, insurgency, violence in the valley. So it is understood that there may be a spillover effect in the region like Jammu and Kashmir if security situation in Afghanistan deteriorates. All right. So basically, largely peaceful Afghanistan, stable Afghanistan is important for India. अगर India अपने larger security conception के बारे में सोच रहा है, so first of all we'll think about modernization of military, strengthening of military, coordination between different forces, coordination between different parts of the government. So internally we are looking at it, but when we are looking at it externally, the things that we don't control, We look at situation in our neighboring countries. But we also look at situation in the immediate geography, in the larger region that we are located in. What are the factors of instability? So certainly Afghanistan becomes important from that perspective. And then you have the other factor that makes this relationship significant is the humanitarian factor, meaning India's commitment or support to Afghan people. Remember, relations are not only between states, not only between governments, but they are also between people. All right. So India is, in a way, at least traditionally speaking, in the last 2 decades, been committed to support the Afghan people. So support to the Afghan people makes for the humanitarian agenda of India's engagements with Afghanistan. The humanitarian factor. That is the humanitarian factor. Any other factor that you can add to this? So that is basically, that is something that is understood, and since it is not possible as of now to engage directly in developing those resources, we are keeping it as the last point. है ना? हमको अफगानिस्तान से क्या मतलब है? नहीं, अब तो वो बात नहीं रहेगी, बट ट्रेडिशनली इन रिसेंट टाइम्स इट वाज द केस. हमको अफगानिस्तान से केवल भलाई करने का मतलब है. हम भले लोग हैं, हमको हमारा कोई स्वार्थ नहीं है अफगानिस्तान के साथ. तो शुरुआत से लेकर अंत तक हमने ये बात कही. अब अंत में एक और बात कह देते हैं. रिसोर्स एंडाउमेंट ऑफ अफगानिस्तान. many surveys have been there. Estimates range from a few billion US dollars to $1 trillion of mineral reserves. Afghanistan is considered to have significant untapped mineral deposits from gold, iron to rare earth minerals. So this is of course going to be an interest to any country. Resource endowment of another country. Last में इसलिए रख रहे हैं कि अभी possible नहीं है. It is not possible. Priority of points. So resource endowment of Afghanistan. Its untapped mineral wealth, which is estimated to be around worth $1 trillion US dollars. है ना? पर वो तो तभी आप निकालना शुरू करोगे जब पॉलिटिकल और सिक्योरिटी स्टेबिलिटी होगी इस देश के अंदर. तो हमने ये बेसिकली मोटा मोटा समझ लिया अपनी चर्चा से, अपनी बातचीत से, कि अगर इंडिया अफगानिस्तान के रिलेशन की बात करेंगे apart from what has happened in Afghanistan, so we understand that first of all, India and Afghanistan have cultural and civilizational connect from the ancient locations and locations like Gandhar, which is today's Kandahar, to the modern day mention or favorable mention of Afghan people in stories like Kabuliwala. Cultural and civilizational connect. The location of Afghanistan is a very important factor in shaping India's interest in Afghanistan, relations with Afghanistan. Afghanistan being a part of South Asia, it is in India's neighborhood. B, India shares a border with Afghanistan in the Wakhan corridor. And C, from a larger connectivity perspective, trade transit perspective, Afghanistan is at the crossroads of regions. So it is geostrategically significant. It connects Central Asia, it shares borders with Pakistan, it shares borders with Iran, which is a West Asian country, it also shares borders with China. So in many senses, it also can be called heart of Asia, right? Heart of Asia. So ये हो गया आपका. और इसके बाद the idea of India-Afghanistan relation also is strengthened by the way Pakistan views Afghanistan. So while India has always treated Afghanistan with a sense of equality, with a sense of friendship, Pakistan's role in Afghanistan from our perspective has been detrimental. In one sense, Pakistan always has wanted to control the politics in Afghanistan because it views Afghanistan from the prism of strategic depth, meaning for its military utility in the context of India. And Afghanistan and Pakistan have certain territorial disputes, territorial disputes, specifically in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. So that makes this relationship important. And then if we go to other factors, we find security is an important factor. Location को combine कर लिया, पाकिस्तान को combine कर लिया, security समझना आसान हो गया. Unstable Afghanistan, एक line का thesis क्या है? An unstable Afghanistan is detrimental to India's interest. In what sense? First of all, as has been the pattern, we have found that when Afghanistan is unstable, Afghan soil is used as a ground for terrorist recruitment and training. Some of the Pakistan-based groups look at Afghanistan in that way. And then since it is close to India's borders, there is always a possibility of spillover effect in the region of Jammu and Kashmir. Instability in Jammu and Kashmir may be affected by what is happening in Afghanistan. And then we have other factors like humanitarian factor, wherein India has been committed to support the welfare of Afghan people. That is basically our trump card in Afghanistan. And then Afghanistan is also attractive in the norm. If ever Afghanistan becomes normal, Afghanistan would be attractive from the perspective of its resource endowment. If we are searching for rare earth minerals, or if we are searching for traditionally precious minerals, Afghanistan may be important. It is geographically closest. For all these factors, India is interested in Afghanistan. Now let's look at various phases of India's interactions with Afghanistan. Hydrocarbon, Prince Ayush Chandela says hydrocarbons. I don't know whether there are hydrocarbons in Afghanistan. I don't know whether, do you know of any reports about hydrocarbons in Afghanistan? I have not heard of it, but maybe अगर आप कह रहे हैं तो हो सकता है. चलिए, हाँ, break. Take a break, and after the break we continue with Afghanistan, and now we will focus on how India has engaged with Afghanistan. All right, and then current scenario, what are the challenges, what are the options. Hello. Hopefully all of you had the time to rest and recuperate. And now we are back and we are talking about India-Afghanistan relations. So simply understand that the relation between India and Afghanistan is affected by the factor of location more than any other factor. So if you see, the Britishers created the boundary between Afghanistan and British India, the Durand Line. Right now the Durand Line is the boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan. ये तो समझ में आ गया आपको. कल कुछ दिन पहले कोई पूछ रहा था कि Durand Line, does it exist? So Durand Line is the basis of modern day boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan. All right. Now if you look at the location of Afghanistan, Afghanistan is a landlocked country. So if it is a landlocked country, in terms of its wider engagements, it would require an access to the open sea. तो इसका access to the open sea कहां से है? या तो पाकिस्तान से या तो ईरान से mainly. And northwards orientation, if you see, these are the countries of Central Asia, if you want to remember, sharing borders with Afghanistan. ये तुर्कमेनिस्तान है. This is Turkmenistan, a Central Asian country. This is Uzbekistan. उज्बेकिस्तान एक बॉर्डर शेयर कर रहा है, और ये क्या है? ताजिकिस्तान. So 3 Central Asian countries, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, ताजिकिस्तान share border with Afghanistan. And ये है वाखान कॉरिडोर. ये दिख रहा है आपको? This narrow sliver of territory, narrow passage of territory, ये यहां पे, ये क्या है? Wakhan corridor, as we said. So here is India's border with Afghanistan at the Wakhan corridor, और यहां पे आप देख रहे हो कि एक छोटा सा चाइना का भी बॉर्डर है. So as I said, smallest land border with China, smallest land border with India for Afghanistan is located in Wakhan corridor. So Wakhan corridor एक तरह से इंपॉर्टेंट हो गया. अब हम कहते हैं कि if Afghanistan is unstable, what happens? So first of all, it provides Pakistan an opportunity to influence the developments in Afghanistan. Since Pakistan shares a border with Afghanistan, what happens is some of the Pakistani groups use this soil for recruitment and training. Since Jammu and Kashmir is close by, we understand that recruitment training of terrorists here in Afghanistan by Pakistani groups has a spillover effect in Jammu and Kashmir, because then these elements can cross over into India in Jammu and Kashmir with the help of Pakistan. यही सारी बातें हमने अभी तक की हैं इस चीज के बारे में जो हम समझने की कोशिश कर रहे थे. Now, if you have any questions, as we say, after the break we take up the questions. If you have any questions, please ask those questions. If अगर आपके पास कोई सवाल हो, ब्रेक के बीच में ही बहुत सारे लोग आ गए सवाल लेके अपने, अब आपके पास कोई सवाल हो आप सवाल पूछ सकते हैं. फॉर्मली आपके पास मौका है, पीछे जो बैठे हुए हैं, एनी वन ऑफ यू. नो क्वेश्चंस. Rashi Baghel, sir, our Gilgit-Baltistan region is shown in Pak in this map. Of course, map was for symbolic purposes, but in our mind we understand that Gilgit-Baltistan practically is occupied by Pakistan. So many of the maps, Google search करके देख लो, many of the maps would show this only. All right, but we understand that formally speaking, Gilgit-Baltistan and entirety of Jammu and Kashmir is a part of the Indian Union. I hope कि आप ये नहीं भूल गए हो, है ना. इसके अलावा हमारे पास क्या अवेलेबल है, सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया के मैप्स. सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया के मैप्स दिखाएं. आई होप एक दिन मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स अपने मैप्स इशू करने लगे. आज मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स से जो मैप्स हैं, दुनिया भर के मैप्स हैं, वो इजीली अवेलेबल नहीं है. जैसे आप जाओगे CIA यूएस में, CIA बहुत ही डिटेल्ड पूरी दुनिया के मैप्स प्रोवाइड कराता है. तो इंडिया के अंदर केवल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया के मैप्स अवेलेबल हैं. तो सिंपल गूगल सर्च किया तो जो पहला मैप दिखा वो दिखाया, सिंबॉलिक पर्पस के लिए था. आई डोंट एंडोर्स द बाउंड्रीज ऑफ इंडिया शोन इन दैट पर्टिकुलर मैप. आई हैव टोल्ड यू दैट जम्मू एंड कश्मीर इन इट्स एंटायरिटी इंक्लूडिंग गिलगिट बाल्टिस्तान इज पार्ट ऑफ इंडियन यूनियन. ऑल राइट. तो जितना समझना है जहां से हम समझ सकते हैं, गूगल सर्च पे आने वाली चीजों को हम नहीं रोक सकते. और ना ही मैं कार्टोग्राफर हूं कि नया मैप बना देता यहाँ पे. ऑल राइट, लेट्स मूव फॉरवर्ड. लेट्स टॉक अबाउट इंडियाज एंगेजमेंट with Afghanistan. We have understood what are the factors which affect India-Afghanistan engagements. So we clearly understand that at a general level, India and Afghanistan ties are friendly and cordial. So at the general level, the relations are friendly and cordial. What is the limitation of this relationship? Limitation is a internal instability in Afghanistan. ये हमेशा लिमिट करता है हमारे रिलेशंस को. एंड ऑन द अदर हैंड, लैक ऑफ डायरेक्ट access, geographic access we are talking about, right? These are two factors which have always affected our relations with Afghanistan. One is internally instability in Afghanistan. Another is lack of direct access, lack of direct geographical access. And lastly, we can also say that it has also been affected by role of external actors. Role of external actors is also important in terms of affecting how we engage with Afghanistan. कैसे 2001 से लेके 2020 तक हम क्या करते रहे? इन्वेस्ट करते रहे अफगानिस्तान में, डेवलपमेंट असिस्टेंस प्रोजेक्ट करते रहे अफगानिस्तान के लिए. 2021 में क्या हो गया? तालिबान टुक ओवर. क्यों? मेजरली because the Americans changed their policy. Americans changed their policy. They did not decide to remain in Afghanistan. और वही तो guarantee the security की अफगानिस्तान के अंदर. So basically the way Americans changed their mind had impact on what we could or could not do in Afghanistan. Similarly, Pakistan is also a third actor. All right, Pakistan is also a third actor. There have been terrorist attacks on Indians in Afghanistan. And generally we trace them to Pakistan or Pakistan supported groups, right? Thirdly, we may have a competition as we see from China. China never had any hesitation in engaging with Taliban. जो भी power में है उसके साथ China को engage करना है. So in many ways we can think of role of third actors, but primarily we would think of it in terms of changing US policy, and it has affected India's ability to engage meaningfully in Afghanistan, right? But largely what we would see is relations being friendly and cordial. We can date back to 1950. In what sense? We signed a treaty of friendship, right? 1979 onwards, we supported Afghan government. Whatever government was in power, we supported it. We wanted to have friendly relations with Afghan governments. At that point in time, India was also criticized कि आपने USSR के invasion को criticize नहीं किया. So India said that we have been told by the USSR that we went there on the invitation of the Afghan government. So generally India's stance has been that whosoever is in power represents the Afghan people, and we have supported Afghan governments. Now 1990s, what was India's position? In the civil war, India indirectly backed what is called Northern Alliance. Northern Alliance because basically the power base of this group was in the northern parts of Afghanistan. Alright? And then if you see 2001 onwards, India supported the Afghan government or Afghan government and people in post-war reconstruction. Post-war reconstruction. So that is basically what India's commitment was, that Afghanistan has seen a lot of destruction. Now 2001 onwards, we see a post-war scenario. And in that particular period, India said that we would be supporting Afghan government and Afghan people in post-war reconstruction. So what does this mean? What kind of support did India provide to Afghan people and Afghan government in this particular period? 2001 to 2021, let's say. Number one, we supported in 2005 Afghanistan's inclusion in SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. India proposed in 2005 that Afghanistan be made a member of SAARC, and 2007 Afghanistan became a member of SAARC with India's support. So that is what India did. And then India generally focused on helping Afghanistan in building state capacity. Generally, that is what India's focus remained, that whatever be the form of government in Afghanistan after this period, we would support Afghan government in state building. The most important expression of this is in 2011. In 2011, what happened? India signed for the first time a strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan. Strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan. First country with which Afghanistan signed a strategic partnership agreement. Now remember, हमने background में बात कर ली. What is happening in this point in time? Why is this significant? Because Afghanistan is witnessing a transition. Political transition in terms of its government being new, right? Security transition in terms of changing American policy. America had said at that point in time that we would like to scale down our operations. In any case, ISAF would be disbanding its operations in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan's future at this point in time seems to be uncertain. Afghanistan is witnessing a transition. So in that particular period, India strengthened its commitment to Afghanistan. Strategic partnership agreement. Now what are the learnings from the strategic partnership agreement? Strategic partnership agreement simply gives us an idea of the broadest commitment that India had to the people and government of Afghanistan. One, India said that it would support Afghanistan in capacity building of the Afghan state India committed itself to supporting the capacity building of the Afghan state. Capacity building, इस तरह की चीजों को, छोटे छोटे टर्म्स को आप याद रखेंगे और बेसिकली अंडरलाइन करेंगे. What did this mean? Basically, investment in infrastructure. All right, infrastructure, investment in education, investment in human resources, meaning training, scholarship to Afghan students into Indian universities. इस तरह का सपोर्ट हम प्रोवाइड करेंगे अफगानिस्तान को. कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग ऑफ अफगान स्टेट एंड अफगान people, right? Secondly, what is it that we said? We said the India would support the economic development of Afghanistan. India committed itself to support the economic development of Afghanistan. ये दूसरी चीज हम करेंगे. इंडिया ने कहा ये कैसे, इसका क्या एग्जाम्पल है? इसका एग्जाम्पल है, वी सेड दैट वी वुड हेल्प अफगान पीपल इन डेवलपिंग देयर नेचुरल रिसोर्सेस, इन्वेस्टमेंट इन द नेचुरल रिसोर्सेस ऑफ अफगानिस्तान. एंड देन वी सेड दैट वी वुड प्रोवाइड ड्यूटी फ्री एक्सेस टू अफगान प्रोडक्ट्स. इंडिया promised that it would help in improving Afghanistan's trade by providing duty free access to Afghan products into Indian market. तो ये बेसिकली इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट को लेके इंडिया का कमिटमेंट था, पार्ट ऑफ द स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप. कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग ऑफ द स्टेट, सो वहां पे हम देखेंगे सोशल सेक्टर सपोर्ट, जैसे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, एजुकेशन, ट्रेनिंग टू अफगान स्टूडेंट्स इन और स्कॉलरशिप्स फॉर अफगान स्टूडेंट्स इनटू इंडियन यूनिवर्सिटीज. इकोनॉमिक सपोर्ट का मतलब हो गया, वी सेड वी कमिटेड आवरसेल्व्स in helping Afghan people for developing their own natural resources, right? Natural resources, water resources or mineral resources, so on and so forth. And we said that we would help in expanding Afghan trade by providing them a duty-free access to Indian market. ये दूसरा कमिटमेंट हमने किया. तीसरा कमिटमेंट हमने क्या किया? तीसरा कमिटमेंट हमने किया कि we understand that ultimately Afghanistan's future depends upon how Afghan people are able to come together and formulate their own vision of future of Afghanistan. So for that we said that peace and reconciliation is important. So India said that it supports, India committed itself to supporting Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, Afghan-controlled inclusive and transparent process of peace and reconciliation, process of peace and reconciliation. All right, so India said that peace and reconciliation has to be a commitment. Ultimately, Afghanistan so far has only witnessed wars. So then, after war, sustainable peace can only be brought about if there is a broad-based agreement between different sections of Afghan society. So we did not deny the need that maybe Afghan government would require to talk with Taliban, etc., etc. But we said any process in Afghanistan should be Afghan-owned, Afghan-led, Afghan-controlled. Meaning we are saying indirectly that the future of Afghanistan should not be determined in Washington, should not be determined in Beijing, should not be determined in Islamabad. It should be determined in Afghanistan by Afghan people. Ideally, the process should be led by Afghan government. So that is what we are saying, that we don't want a peace process which is imposed. Afghan people should be given an opportunity to decide their own future. It should be inclusive. It should not leave aside any important actor. Every actor should be included. Every section of society should be included. It should be transparent. We should know what is happening. All right, we should know what is happening. Any secret deals should not decide the future of Afghanistan. So basically that is something that we said, that we support, we remain committed to an Afghan owned, Afghan controlled, but inclusive and transparent process of peace and reconciliation. And next thing that India said also highlights its views. India said that Afghanistan needs international support, mainly international security support. So India committed itself to mobilizing international support to Afghanistan. We realize that we can't do everything on our own. हम सब कुछ नहीं कर सकते, हमारे पास इतना पैसा नहीं है, नहीं इतना इन्फ्लुएंस है हमारा. So thereby what we are saying is that it should be acknowledged that Afghanistan requires long-term international support, and India committed itself to mobilize such a long-term international support for अफगानिस्तान. ये चीज इंडिया ने की कि अफगानिस्तान को इंटरनेशनल सपोर्ट की जरूरत होगी. हमारी नजर में ये हमेशा बहुत जरूरी था कि अफगानिस्तान को इंटरनेशनल सिक्योरिटी सपोर्ट मिले. उसके बिना स्टेबिलिटी इन अफगानिस्तान कैन नॉट बी ब्रॉट अबाउट. वी वर नॉट अंडर द इल्यूजन दैट द न्यू अफगान आर्मी इज गोइंग टू बी सफिशिएंट फॉर सपोर्टिंग सिक्योरिटी इन अफगानिस्तान. उसके लिए इंटरनेशनल सपोर्ट चाहिए. सो इंडिया कमिटेड इटसेल्फ टू मोबिलाइजिंग इंटरनेशनल सपोर्ट for Afghanistan. So ये चार major points थे in the strategic partnership agreement. These 4 points are basically the drivers of India's interest in Afghanistan. India ने क्या किया? So basically इन सभी का example आपको मिल जाएगा. When it comes to economic development and capacity building support, what is it that India did? So highlight figure ये है that India over the years committed $3 billion as development assistance कहते हैं हम, development assistance. All right, $3 billion in development assistance is what India committed to Afghanistan. कहाँ गया ये पैसा? So we have large infrastructure project. So one is what is called the Salma Dam. Salma Dam, which is basically also known as India-Afghanistan Friendship Dam. Salma Dam इसलिए कि सलमा नाम के village में है. This is in Salma village. It is on the Hari-Rud river. Hari-Rud river in the Herat province of Afghanistan. यहाँ पे है ये डैम, सलमा डैम. इसके अलावा क्या? इसके अलावा एक रोड बनाया इंडिया ने, बहुत सारे रोड बनाए, बट वन दैट इज इंपॉर्टेंट इज डेलाराम जारांज हाईवे. ये एग्जांपल है इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में कैसे गया हमारा डेवलपमेंट असिस्टेंस. $3 बिलियन कहां गए, राइट? इसके अलावा इंडिया ने एक प्रोजेक्ट सपोर्ट किया जिसको कहते हैं पुले खुमरी ट्रांसमिशन लाइन, meaning the entire power support to the Afghan capital. काबुल में जहां से बिजली आ रही है वो इसी ट्रांसमिशन लाइन से आ रही थी. पुले खुमरी ट्रांसमिशन लाइन इज व्हाट इंडिया बिल्ट. ऑलराइट, इसके अलावा बहुत सारे लोग आप में कह रहे हैं एड की तरह से हमने क्या बनाया? पार्लियामेंट बिल्डिंग. वी गिफ्टेड द पार्लियामेंट बिल्डिंग टू द अफगान पीपल. At that point in time, it was said it is the gift from world's largest democracy to world's youngest democracy. All right. तो पार्लियामेंट बिल्डिंग हमने बनाई, सलमा डैम बनाया, डेलाराम जारांज हाईवे बनाया, पुले खुमरी बनाया. ये बेसिकली डेवलपमेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं जो अफगानिस्तान में हमने किए. From 2016 onwards, we said that we would be implementing more high impact development projects. So basically 2016 we announced new development partnership with Afghanistan. इसमें we identified various projects, more than 100 projects across 31 provinces of Afghanistan. Projects, what kind of projects are we talking about? If there is a requirement of a school building, we build that. If there is a requirement of a building for a medical dispensary or clinic, we built that. We built small stretches of roads. So smaller but high impact community development projects is something that we implemented under the new development partnership with Afghanistan 2016 onwards. More than 100 projects, 116 projects in fact, were implemented by India in 31 across all the provinces of Afghanistan. किसी एक province में limited नहीं है, across all the provinces of Afghanistan. So basically that is where the money went. One example of a project which never actually culminated was the development of iron ore mines. ये एक प्रोजेक्ट था जो इंडियन कंपनीज को मिल गया था, इसको कहते हैं हाजीगाक आयरन ओर माइन. हाजीगाक आयरन ओर माइन. It was at that point in time said to be the largest iron ore mine in Afghanistan. Project था, इंडिया को मिला, डेवलप कभी नहीं हुआ. So this is something that is an example of how India also took steps towards investing in the natural resources of Afghanistan by showing its willingness or participating in the development of the Hajigaak iron ore mine. तो यहां पे हमारा पैसा गया. इसके अलावा हमने क्या किया, जैसा कि मैंने कहा है, scholarships to students of Afghanistan. Around every year India issued 3,000 scholarships to the Afghan students. इसके अलावा training, we opened up our training institutions, training to Afghan civilian as well as security officials. Security thoda limited, but civilian training. For example, India had taken up the project of training Afghan diplomats. Afghan diplomats for some phase of their training used to come to some of the universities in India. So इस तरह के projects generally हम देखेंगे India implement कर रहा है from the period of 2001 to 2021, right? ये सारी चीजें इंडिया ने की हैं. अगर आप पूछें कि इंडिया ने क्या किया अफगानिस्तान में. Now moving on, example of all this is there in your content also. Apart from that, what India did, any other example? मास्क के अंदर से आवाज नहीं आ रही है. फोर्टिफाइड बिस्किट्स, ह्यूमैनिटेरियन असिस्टेंस, उस पर भी आएंगे अभी. उसके अलावा तापी पाइपलाइन, चाबहार पोर्ट भी बना दिया इंडिया ने. चलिए, इसके अलावा इंडिया ने क्या किया, इंडिया ने जैसा आपने कहा अफगान एक्सपोर्ट्स को ड्यूटी फ्री एक्सेस दिया इन द इंडियन मार्केट. ड्यूटी फ्री एक्सेस. इसके अलावा इंडिया ने क्या किया, सो इंडियाज एफर्ट्स वर ऑलवेज लिमिटेड बाय डायरेक्ट एक्सेसिबिलिटी. पाकिस्तान can provide direct accessibility for India to Afghanistan, but Pakistan denied land transit. पाकिस्तान ने डिनाई किया लैंड ट्रांजिट, तो इंडिया ने क्या किया उसके जवाब में, इंडिया वर्कड ऑन ऑल्टरनेटिव रूट्स फॉर कनेक्टिविटी. ऑल्टरनेटिव रूट्स फॉर कनेक्टिविटी. सो इसमें क्या हुआ, इन 2016 इंडिया साइंड अ ट्राईपार्टाइट एग्रीमेंट. 3 लोग इन्वॉल्व थे, इंडिया, Iran, Afghanistan. Trade and transit agreement was signed, and part of that was the development of the Chabahar port, right? The idea was कि चाबहार से हम जाएंगे जाहेदान तक. जाहेदान इज अ बॉर्डरिंग सिटी इन ईरान, और फिर वहां से हम एंटर करेंगे अफगानिस्तान, और फिर उसके बाद हमारा डेलाराम जारांज हाईवे है ही, वो हमने बनाया है, उससे हम अफगानिस्तान को के अलग अलग हिस्सों को आसानी से एक्सेस कर पाएंगे. ये बेसिक आइडिया था. इसके अलावा हमने क्या किया, हमने अनाउंस किया एयर कॉरिडोर्स. लैंड बेस्ड कनेक्टिविटी पॉसिबल नहीं है, तो हम क्या करेंगे, एयर कॉरिडोर्स, डेडिकेटेड एयर कॉरिडोर्स बिटवीन सिटीज. सो दिल्ली काबुल, दिल्ली कंधार, अमृतसर कंधार, इस तरह के बेसिकली दिल्ली कंधार, इस तरह के हमने एयर रूट्स आइडेंटिफाई किए. किस लिए, to expedite Afghan exports into India. All right, exports like dry fruits or exports which were seasonal, जिनको क्विक टाइम में इंडिया के मार्केट पहुंचाना था, तो उसके लिए हमने एयर कॉरिडोर्स बनाए फॉर ट्रेड, है ना, डायरेक्ट ट्रेड रिलेटेड फ्लाइट्स फ्रॉम some points in Afghanistan to some points in India, Delhi to Kandahar, Delhi to Kabul, Mumbai to Kabul, अमृतसर टू काबुल. तो ये इस तरह के एयर कॉरिडोर्स हमने डिक्लेयर किए. माइक दूं मैं आपको? नहीं, मतलब अगर आप बीच में कुछ लाइटर एलिमेंट आपको जोड़ना है, जोक सुनाना है, तो आ सकते हैं आप यहाँ पे. और हाँ, ना अभी तो हम वहां पहुंचे ही नहीं है 6+2+1 डायलॉग में. तो आपने पूछा है, वैसे आपको जवाब पता होगा, आप बताइए व्हाट इज 6+2? कहां पढ़ा आपने? तो क्या पढ़ा था? सिक्स प्लस टू प्लस वन कौन है? कब हुई थी ये मीटिंग? ऐसे सरप्राइजिंग फैक्ट्स आप मुझसे पूछेंगे, मैं कैसे बता पाऊंगा? अभी तो मैं वहां तक पहुंचा भी नहीं हूं. चलिए, ये सब हमने किया. इसके बाद हमने क्या किया? इसके बाद जो एक प्रोमिनेंट चीज हमने की थी वो ये है कि वी स्टार्टेड पार्टिसिपेटिंग इन वेरियस इंटरनेशनल इनिशिएटिव्स फोकस्ड ऑन अफगानिस्तान. सो उसमें से एक है हार्ट ऑफ एशिया कॉन्फ्रेंस. हार्ट ऑफ एशिया प्रोसेस भी कहते हैं इसको. इसका दूसरा नाम है इस्तांबुल प्रोसेस. इस्तांबुल प्रोसेस. इस्तांबुल प्रोसेस स्टार्टेड इन 2011. Istanbul process. The idea was to bring together different states, primarily neighbors of Afghanistan, interested in stability in Afghanistan, and international organizations on one platform to jointly implement projects in Afghanistan. Projects like infrastructure projects or cultural projects or education projects, which were called confidence building measures. Confidence building measures कहते थे उनको, डिफरेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स को कैसे हम इंप्लीमेंट करें अफगानिस्तान में. कनेक्टिविटी प्रोजेक्ट, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट, एजुकेशन प्रोजेक्ट. ये पर्पस था हार्ट ऑफ एशिया कॉन्फ्रेंस का, इस्तांबुल प्रोसेस का. इंडिया पार्टिसिपेटेड इन इट एंड इन 2016 इंडिया हैड होस्टेड द 6th मिनिस्टीरियल कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ हार्ट ऑफ एशिया प्रोसेस. कहां पे? अमृतसर. इंडिया हैड होस्टेड 6th मिनिस्ट्रियल कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ द हार्ट ऑफ एशिया प्रोसेस. फिर एक और इनिशिएटिव था जिसको कहते हैं रेका, रीजनल इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑन अफगानिस्तान. रीजनल इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑन अफगानिस्तान. इट स्टार्टेड इन 2005. इंडिया पार्टिसिपेटेड इन रेगुलरली. 2006 इंडिया हैड होस्टेड द मीटिंग ऑफ रेका इन Delhi. All right. So, ये basically are examples of how India said that international support to Afghanistan is required, and thereby 2 examples where India prominently participated, at least at the level of dialogue, is Heart of Asia process, also known as the Istanbul process, क्योंकि इस्तांबुल में पहली मीटिंग हुई थी इसलिए इस्तांबुल process. India hosted 6th ministerial conference of the Istanbul process in Amritsar. Second is RECA, Regional Economic Cooperation Conference on अफगानिस्तान. इसका आइडिया ये था टू ब्रिंग स्टेबिलिटी इन अफगानिस्तान, प्रमोशन ऑफ इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज, प्रमोशन ऑफ ट्रेड इज गोइंग टू बी द वे फॉरवर्ड. तो इस तरह के आइडियाज को डिस्कस करने के लिए रेका एक प्लेटफॉर्म था. सेंट्रल एशियन कंट्रीज, इंडिया, मेनी ऑफ दीज कंट्रीज पार्टिसिपेटेड इन इट. 2005 it started. 2006 India hosted a meeting. I'm also giving you a sign that if there is an international development in which India participates, what kind of details are important. All right, is there an alternative name? What year did it start? Has India hosted any meeting of it? All right, so that is basically, क्योंकि अब ये पुरानी चीजें हो गई, so इनकी वैल्यू यही है कि कब शुरू हुआ, क्या इंडिया ने कोई मीटिंग होस्ट की है. बट what are we looking at them as examples of? जो थर्ड पॉइंट था, इंडियाज कमिटमेंट टुवर्ड्स मोबिलाइजिंग इंटरनेशनल सपोर्ट टू अफगानिस्तान. तो ये उस पीरियड में एग्जाम्पल्स हम दे सकते हैं. इसके अलावा जैसे किसी ने कहा कि तापी पाइपलाइन, चलो इसको ऐसे एक प्रोजेक्ट के रूप में ले लेते हैं जो इंटरनेशनल प्रोजेक्ट है, वैसे हम इसको पढ़ते हैं सेंट्रल एशिया में. So Tapi pipeline is Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. 2010, this pipeline was, in a sense, it started with an agreement involving India and other countries. So Tapi is a pipeline which aims at bringing Turkmen gas. Turkmenistan has significant reserves of natural gas via Afghanistan and Pakistan to India. So again, it was an involvement in a project that also was relevant for Afghanistan. So here again is an example where India is participating with other countries, international community in stabilizing Afghanistan. ये सारी चीजें हमने अफगानिस्तान में की. Now last point is peace and reconciliation. Peace and reconciliation. What has been India's approach on this particular issue in Afghanistan? क्या approach रहा है? So first of all, क्या वो line हमने use की थी पहले? What kind of peace process that India support in Afghanistan? A peace and reconciliation process which is Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, Afghan-controlled, transparent and inclusive. That is basic commitment of India. Now, first of all, India's position was always that Afghan government should lead the process. Afghan government should lead the process. Why? Because for us, Afghan government is the legitimately elected representative of the Afghan people. अब अगर हम Afghan people कह दें तो भाई कोई representative तो चाहिए. So if there is a government and it has come about through a process, then that is the representative. हमारा दोस्त भी कौन है वहां पे? Who is our best friend in Afghanistan? The Afghan government. So we always believe that Afghan government should lead the process. And of course international support चाहिए, लेकिन ultimately it should be led by Afghan government. Now 2018, we know that Afghan government had offered a ceasefire and peace negotiation to Taliban. तो तालिबान ने accept नहीं किया. But 2018, what had happened was Russia had organized a conference. 2018 Moscow conference was organized by Russia. Russia had also started. Russia को समझ में आ गया, सबको समझ में आ गया था कि US is planning to go. So they opened up their communication lines with Taliban. All right. So Russia had organized a conference in which it had invited Afghan government and Taliban for peace talks. India को भी बुलाया because Russia is a friendly country. So basically in this particular conference, India did not participate officially, but India sent non-official, not unofficial, but non-official representation. India ने 2 retired ambassadors को भेजा कि भाई आप जाइए टेबल पे बैठिए सुनिए क्या बात हो रही है. Not official participation. हम ऐसे किसी भी डायलॉग में पार्टिसिपेट नहीं करना चाहते थे जहां पे तालिबान प्रेजेंट हो, क्योंकि फिर वो इसका मतलब होगा कि हम कहीं ना कहीं तालिबान को रिकॉग्नाइज कर रहे हैं. सो दैट इज हाउ इट ग्रेजुअली स्टार्टेड. मॉस्को कॉन्फ्रेंस 2018 अबाउट पीस इन अफगानिस्तान. इंडिया वाज इनवाइटेड. इंडिया सेंट नॉन ऑफिशियल रिप्रेजेंटेशन. 2019, when the peace process between US and Taliban started, what did India do? India again reiterated that Afghan government should not be ignored. Afghan government should be made a part of this particular process. But India issued a statement in this particular process. 2019 के बाद इंडिया ने एक स्टेटमेंट इशू किया था 2020 में. क्या कहा था उसमें? इंडिया ने फिर से अपनी पोजीशन बताई थी अबाउट इट्स व्यू ऑन ऑनगोइंग पीस प्रोसेस. ऑलराइट. तो क्या कहा इंडिया ने? इंडिया ने कहा एनी प्रोसेस ऑफ पीस एंड रिकॉन्सिलिएशन must respect the constitutional provisions of Afghanistan, meaning we have made progress. Afghanistan has a constitution. Any process of peace and reconciliation must respect the constitutional provisions, constitutional progress, political progress made in Afghanistan, must uphold minority rights and rights of women. That is what India said. Must uphold certain developments that Afghanistan has already achieved. For example, Afghan constitution ensures minority rights or ensures participation of women in politics. So this should be respected. India said any process of peace and reconciliation must not leave any vacant territories which could be misused by terrorist groups. Meaning any process of peace and reconciliation must not leave any vacant territories which then later on can be used by terrorist groups. So this is what India is saying, that okay, we are now accepting the reality that Taliban and USA are talking, but we believe that Afghan government, any such process of peace and reconciliation is incomplete without the participation of Afghan government. Secondly, any such process of peace and reconciliation must take into consideration the constitutional progress and the political achievements of the past decade, which meant we must uphold certain developments in Afghanistan, so for example, minority rights, interest of the minorities or rights of women. ये progress Afghanistan ने की है इतने सालों में, let's not lose it. And then we said ultimately our concern, security. अगर आप बात कर रहे हैं, so then it should be comprehensive, it should be conclusive. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि आपने आधी अधूरी बात की, छोड़ के चले गए और उसके बाद अफगानिस्तान के कुछ हिस्से ऐसे हैं जहां पे एनार्की है और उन हिस्सों का इस्तेमाल टेररिस्ट ग्रुप्स कर रहे हैं. तो एनी प्रोसेस ऑफ पीस एंड रिकॉन्सिलिएशन मस्ट नॉट लीव एनी वैकेंट टेरिटरीज टू बी मिसयूज्ड बाय द टेररिस्ट ग्रुप्स. ऐसा इंडिया ने बीच में कहा 2019 से 20 के बीच में. वी आर स्टिल नॉट टॉकिंग विथ तालिबान, ऐसा हमने कहा. तो बेसिकली यही होता है, ये चीजें हमारे कंट्रोल में नहीं है. US India kept on talking with each other. US said that we are informing India of what is happening. बट हमारे हाथ में बहुत सारी चीजें नहीं थी. यूएस ने डिसाइड कर लिया था तालिबान से बात करना, हम उसको रोक नहीं सकते थे. तो दैट्स व्हाई वी गिव स्टेटमेंट्स कि यार कम से कम इतना तो कर दो, इतना तो होना चाहिए, पर जरूरी नहीं था कि ऐसा हो. देन व्हाट हैपेंड वाज ग्रेजुअली 2020 इन द मंथ ऑफ February, the Indian ambassador to Doha witnessed the signing of peace agreement between USA and तालिबान. तो अब यहां पे हम देखते हैं क्या हुआ. थोड़ा सा हमने रियलिटी को एक्सेप्ट करना शुरू किया एंड द एग्रीमेंट बिटवीन तालिबान एंड यूएसए, वी डू नॉट पार्टिसिपेट बट वी वर सेंट एन इन्विटेशन, सो वी विटनेस द साइनिंग ऑफ. हमने ये नहीं कहा कि हम नहीं जाएंगे, वी विटनेस द साइनिंग ऑफ द एग्रीमेंट बिटवीन यूएस एंड तालिबान. ऐसा हमने किया. इसके बाद बात जब आगे बढ़ी इन 2020 September, for the first time, in 2020 September, for the first time, we see India directly participating in any meeting where Taliban is also present. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar addressed the inaugural session of what? of intra-Afghan dialogue. Of intra-Afghan dialogue. So पहली बार कोई ऑफिशियल रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऐसी जगह पे है इंडिया का जहां पे तालिबान भी मौजूद है. तो हम कुछ कह नहीं रहे हैं कि हम तालिबान को एक्नॉलेज करते हैं, रिकॉग्नाइज करते हैं कि नहीं करते हैं, बट वी आर रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू हाउ सिचुएशन इज अनफोल्डिंग. कई बार आपको फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी रखनी पड़ती है. आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि मैंने कल को ये कहा था, मैं जिंदगी भर यही कहता रहूंगा, बिकॉज सिचुएशन चेंजेस. ऑल राइट. So India then gradually is acknowledging the changing situation. 2020 September, for the first time, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who is India's External Affairs Minister, is addressing a meeting of the Afghan peace dialogue, which also involved Taliban. So पहली बार कोई ऑफिशियल ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म जहां तालिबान भी है, वहां इंडिया का रिप्रेजेंटेशन भी है. राइट. एंड देन हमने क्या किया इन अगस्त 2021, इंडियन रिप्रेजेंटेटिव मीट्स तालिबान एनवॉय और तालिबान रिप्रेजेंटेटिव. पहली बार 31 अगस्त 2021 there is a meeting between Indian representative, Indian ambassador and the Taliban representative. So यहां पे हम जब बात कर रहे हैं तो किस बारे में बात कर रहे हैं? यहां पे हम जब बात कर रहे हैं तो हम बेसिकली इश्यूज जो रेज किए हमने, वो पहला था ह्यूमैनिटेरियन कंसर्न्स, दूसरा था evacuation of stranded Indians, and तीसरा था we raised the issue of terrorism. तो बातचीत जो हो रही है तालिबान के साथ वो अब इशू बेस्ड है. इट इज डिक्टेटेड बाय द सिचुएशन. So what is it that we initially take up with Taliban after Taliban has come to power in Afghanistan? We basically talked about humanitarian concerns, minority rights, women's rights. We said that evacuation of stranded Indians is our concern, so we expected support from Taliban that उसमें कोई भी hindrance नहीं आएगा. So that is basically what we'll do. If our people are there, we will basically first think about evacuating them. उसके बाद हम कोई और चीज सोचेंगे. And thirdly, we said that we expect that Afghan soil would not be allowed for terrorist activities. तो बातचीत जब हम कह रहे हैं तो बेसिकली हम जो हमारी मेन रिक्वायरमेंट्स है उसको कन्वे करने के लिए कर रहे हैं. तो ये तीन चीजें हमने उनको कन्वे की. किसको कन्वे की? तालिबान को. जब तालिबान से मीटिंग हो रही है उसके बाद क्या हुआ? यू वुड रिमेंबर दैट इंडिया हैड हेडेड द यूएन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल लास्ट ईयर. इंडिया ने क्या किया था? इंडिया यूएन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल का चेयर था, है ना? आपको याद है? सो देन दैट इज अनदर ओकेजन वेयर वी कैन रेज दिस काइंड ऑफ एन इशू. सो सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल में को चेयर करते हुए, और सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल का चेयर 1 महीने के लिए होता है. ऑल राइट. सो अगस्त में जब हमने चेयर किया सितंबर में, तो हमने एक रेजोल्यूशन सपोर्ट किया, रेजोल्यूशन 1593, यूएनएससी रेजोल्यूशन 1593. यूएनएससी रेजोल्यूशन 1593 इंडिया ने स्टीयर किया बीइंग अ चेयर. सो दिस इज समथिंग दैट इंडिया सेज इज इट्स पोजीशन ऑन द फ्यूचर ऑफ अफगानिस्तान. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, ये रेजोल्यूशन किस बारे में बात करता है? This resolution talks about the need for continued humanitarian support. Continued humanitarian support to Afghanistan. That Afghan people need support, specifically in the context of how COVID-19 was still a challenge. So they needed medical support, medical provisions, and food shortages were there in Afghanistan, so that kind of support. So that is what we are saying. India reiterated on the need for, ये हमारा मैसेज किसको है? इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी को है. दैट इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी शुड डू व्हाट? शुड इंश्योर ह्यूमैनिटेरियन सपोर्ट टू अफगानिस्तान. Secondly, this resolution also talks about evacuation of those stranded in Afghanistan, including Afghan people. If they want to leave Afghanistan, they should be allowed to do so. किसी को भी रोकना नहीं चाहिए. Those who want to leave Afghanistan, evacuation of those people should also be supported by international community, as well as it should be ensured that Taliban also does so. Evacuation of those stranded in Afghanistan. ये resolution इसके बारे में, क्योंकि remember August 15 is when Taliban establishes control in अफगानिस्तान. काबुल जीत जाते हैं, वो अफगानिस्तान कंट्रोल करते हैं. तो ये नया सिचुएशन है, अभी चल ही रहा है. अभी इमीडिएट मुद्दे यही है, इवैक्यूएशन ऑफ दो स्ट्रैंडेड इन अफगानिस्तान. इसके अलावा मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली 1593 reiterates the need for ensuring that Afghan soil is not used to promote terrorism. ये इंडिया का कहना है कि भाई ये इंश्योर करना चाहिए. एंड 1593 इज इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज इट identifies by name certain terrorist groups which are inimical to India. So basically इस resolution के अंदर लश्कर-ए-तैयबा और जैश-ए-मोहम्मद जैसे groups which are basically primary concern for India are mentioned. एक UN resolution के अंदर कि इस तरह के groups भी अफगान सॉइल का इस्तेमाल नहीं कर पाए टेररिज्म प्रमोट करने के लिए, ये इंश्योर करने की जरूरत है. ये इंडिया ने कहा. एंड अल्टीमेटली लाइक एवरी अदर resolution, India called for cessation of violence and the need for a comprehensive intra-Afghan dialogue. So basically now India's position is starting to emerge. भी अचानक से ये हो गया. 20 साल से हम क्या कर रहे थे? 20 साल से हम कह रहे थे हमारा क्या रोल है? सपोर्ट टू अफगान पीपल, सपोर्ट टू अफगान गवर्नमेंट, कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बिल्डिंग, ये करेंगे वो करेंगे, है ना. मिलिट्री भेजने का हमारा ऑप्शन कभी नहीं था. अब अचानक से क्या हुआ? सिचुएशन चेंज हो गई. व्हाट डू वी डू? सो देन यू डोंट चेंज योर पोजिशन ओवरनाइट, यू वेट एंड वॉच. वेट एंड वॉच इज ऑल्सो अ policy sometimes. Prime Minister Narasimha Rao had said once, sometimes the best course of action is taking no action. कभी कभी कुछ ना करना भी एक ऑप्शन होता है आपका. बेस्ट ऑप्शन कभी कभी क्या होता है? कुछ ना करना. जीवन में आपको चीजों को स्वीकार करना पड़ता है. यू हैव टू टेक द बिटर पिल एट टाइम्स. हर समय जिंदगी में मीठी चीजें नहीं हो सकती. सो बेसिक, तो उस सिचुएशन में हम क्या कर रहे हैं? हम देख रहे हैं वहां क्या हो रहा है. तो पहला ध्यान हमारा किस चीज पे है कि भाई हमारे लोग हैं क्या वहां पे, तो उनको निकालते हैं. तो क्या हुआ? इंडिया ने क्या किया था? कौन सा ऑपरेशन कंडक्ट किया था? करंट अफेयर्स आप सभी पढ़ रहे हैं ना. सो व्हाट इज द ऑपरेशन दैट इंडिया हैड कंडक्टेड टू इवैक्यूएट इट्स सिटीजंस? गंगा यूक्रेन में था. मैत्री, यमुना, कोई अखबार नहीं पढ़ता है, कोई न्यूज़पेपर नहीं पढ़ता है. तो सामने तो फोन पे गूगल पे देख के आप बता ही देंगे. ऑपरेशन देवी शक्ति ये इंडिया ने कंडक्ट किया था टू इवैक्यूएट इट्स सिटीजन्स फ्रॉम अफगानिस्तान. कुछ अफगान लोगों को भी लेके हम आए थे, तो ये हमने किया था. उसके बाद हमने क्या किया? एस्टैब्लिश कॉन्टैक्ट विथ दोज हु आर इन इफेक्टिव पावर इन अफगानिस्तान. जो पावर में है उनको तो अब आप जिद नहीं कर सकते ना कि नहीं हम तो अफगान गवर्नमेंट से ही बात करेंगे. देयर इज नो अफगान गवर्नमेंट. सो हुसोएवर इज इन पावर, अगर आपको अपना हित साधना है तो उससे बात करना पड़ेगा. तो ये जरूर है कि पीछे हमने कहा था कि नहीं नहीं तालिबान इज टेररिस्ट, पर अगर अब तालिबान पावर में है तो नए सिचुएशन को देखना पड़ेगा. सो व्हेन वी टॉक्ड विद तालिबान व्हाट डिड वी डू? डिड वी से दैट वी रिकॉग्नाइज यू, वी आर योर फ्रेंड्स? नहीं, अभी उसकी बात नहीं हो रही. इशू बेस्ड इंटरेक्शन. When we interacted, what did we raise? Humanitarian concerns, minority rights, women's rights. We said evacuation of Indian citizens is our priority, so we need your support. We said that ultimately terrorism should not be allowed to take roots in Afghan soil. ये आप इंश्योर करेंगे क्या? तो अब हम तालिबान को कह रहे हैं ball is in your court. Your recognition by us would depend on your एक्शन. आप क्या करते हैं? तालिबान ने भी शुरुआत में कहा कि वी वुड लाइक इंडिया टू कम बैक एंड कंप्लीट इट्स प्रोजेक्ट्स, कि प्रोजेक्ट जो अनाउंस किया आप आइए कंप्लीट कीजिए. हमने कहा कि नहीं नहीं अभी थोड़ा रुक के देखते हैं आगे आप क्या करने वाले हैं. देन व्हाट डिड वी डू? वी यूटिलाइज्ड इंटरनेशनल फोरम. सो व्हेन वी चेयर्ड यूएनएससी वी बेसिकली हेडेड अ डिबेट ऑन अफगानिस्तान एंड द आउटकम was a resolution which was drafted by India, steered by India. Resolution क्या नंबर क्या है? 1593. That is India's position. What is India saying again? A, humanitarian concerns. Concerns about minorities, concerns about women, concerns about those who are stranded in Afghanistan. And also concerns about the people of Afghanistan. The international community should not forget it. एक तरह से इंडिया याद दिला रहा है पूरी दुनिया को कि आपका कमिटमेंट है अफगान लोगों के प्रति. दूसरा इंडिया क्या कह रहा है? इवैक्यूएशन. There are many people who are still stranded in Afghanistan. So evacuation should be smooth, and for that international community must ensure, Taliban must ensure that those who want to leave Afghanistan are given an opportunity to do so. Thirdly, what were we saying? Terrorism. Again, wahi baat. Terrorism. That international community has a responsibility to ensure that Afghan soil is not used to promote terrorism by anyone. And in this case, we were able to include the names of those groups about which we are directly concerned. Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. And ultimately, we are also saying that what is the way forward? The way forward is not arms, not violence, but a peaceful dialogue. So at the earliest possible, an intra-Afghan dialogue should take place. This remains to be India's position vis-a-vis Afghanistan. You can define India's position as of now vis-a-vis Afghanistan along these 4 lines. अभी वो क्वेश्चन नहीं आया कि हमने तालिबान की गवर्नमेंट को रिकॉग्नाइज किया है कि नहीं किया है. इशू बेस्ड step by step interaction is there. We have not decided on the question whether we acknowledge Taliban or not. As I said, it would depend on how Taliban conducts itself. We are waiting and watching. है ना? जाके हम वहां गवर्नमेंट तो चेंज कर नहीं सकते, तो वो ऑप्शन नहीं है हमारे पास. एंड देन अल्टीमेटली व्हाट वी डिड इन 2022 क्या हुआ है? इंडिया decided to do what? To reopen its embassy in Afghanistan. We had evacuated our diplomats as the situation unfolded in Afghanistan. This year, we have made a small step of reopening our embassy. Ambassador नहीं भेज रहे हैं अभी, हमने अपनी embassy खोल दी. यानी कि we are sending our representative to Afghanistan so that we are directly present in Afghanistan and we can assess how the situation is unfolding. We can get a real sense of what is the approach of Taliban government now. हम समझ पाए कि क्या हो रहा है, कैसे हो रहा है, अपना concerns convey कर पाए. ये हमने किया है. और in the whole period, what we have done is we have continued to supply humanitarian assistance. We have continued to provide humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan. ये बार बार आता रहता है, आपने देखा ही होगा. So what have we provided? We have generally provided wheat for food security and we have provided medicine. We say that around 30,000 tons of humanitarian supplies have been provided to Afghanistan by India and this continues to be the case. ये हम कैसे करते हैं? We basically do it through the international humanitarian agencies like the World Food Program. उनको हम अपना हेल्प प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं, तालिबान को हम नहीं दे रहे. World Food Program or other UN agencies which are active, we are basically providing them supplies of food or supplies of medicine for the Afghan people. Now, this is the current scenario. So, in clear terms, just understand what were India's limitations in Afghanistan, ताकि आप समझ पाए कि भाई जो अंत में हुआ वो क्यों हुआ और इंडिया ऐसा क्यों कर रहा है. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, आपको पहले से ही समझ है, एक तो क्लियर क्या है, जियोग्राफिकल लिमिटेशन है. व्हाट इज द जियोग्राफिकल लिमिटेशन? लैक ऑफ डायरेक्ट एक्सेस और डायरेक्ट कनेक्ट. सो हमने देखा इन द पास्ट, इसको अगर हम जोड़ें, सॉल्यूशन इंडिया ने क्या किया था, ऑल्टरनेटिव रूट्स, चाबहार या एयर कॉरिडोर्स, ये किया था. लैक ऑफ डायरेक्ट एक्सेस को डील करने के लिए इंडिया ने क्या किया था, चाबहार या एयर कॉरिडोर्स जैसे प्रोविजंस किए थे. लैक ऑफ डायरेक्ट एक्सेस इज स्टिल अ प्रॉब्लम फॉर इंडिया. So that is a fundamental limitation. What is the other limitation? Domestic situation or domestic polity in Afghanistan. So even when Taliban was not in power, issues like corruption or infighting, ये प्रॉब्लम थी वहां पे, है ना. करप्शन जनरली जहां पे भी लार्ज स्केल डेवलपमेंट प्रोजेक्ट चल रहा है, इस तरह के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट प्रोन इलाकों में वहां पे करप्शन होता है ना. इन इंडिया ऑल्सो यू विल फाइंड एरियाज वेयर देयर हैज बीन इंसर्जेंसी, देयर हैज बीन लॉट ऑफ मनी विच हैज बीन सेंट फॉर डेवलपमेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स, और बहुत सारे लोग अमीर बन गए हैं उसका इस्तेमाल करके, डेवलपमेंट तो हुआ नहीं. So corruption was a problem, infighting was a problem. For example, the Afghan presidential elections 2015-16 and then latest elections, ये जो दो elections थे, इनका result ही दो महीने बाद आया. Why? Because there were contestation about the result of elections, कि कौन जीता है, rigging हुई है कि नहीं हुई है. So there was infighting. All right, there was infighting there. So यहां पे भी आसान नहीं था हमारे लिए, पर हमारे हाथ में नहीं था. दूसरा, always was the factor Taliban resurging, and then there was another factor that ISIS is also making inroads in Afghanistan. अब ISIS का कहना है कि हम बनाएंगे इस्लामिक स्टेट ऑफ खोरासान, है ना. भले ही आपके पास पावर नहीं हो, लेकिन अब सोशल मीडिया का जमाना है, तो आजकल हर कोई पॉपुलर हो सकता है, हर कोई अपनी बात कह सकता है, हर कोई अपनी बात ऐसे कह सकता है लगे कि यार यही सच बोल रहा है, इसके अलावा तो कोई सच बोल नहीं रहा. तो उन्होंने कहा कि भाई हम वी आर गोइंग टू मेक इस्लामिक स्टेट ऑफ खोरासान. गोइंग बैक इन हिस्ट्री, उनका अपना आइडिया है दैट दे विल क्रिएट एन इस्लामिक स्टेट ऑफ खोरासान. तो आईसिस इज ऑल्सो कमिंग. So these are the internal developments within Afghanistan, which basically was a problem, is a problem. And then of course the security जुड़ा हुआ है domestic situation से, security situation. Security situation in Afghanistan was always marked by what? One, the presence of external or foreign troops had guaranteed सिक्योरिटी इन अफगानिस्तान. अफगानिस्तान में 20 साल से सिक्योरिटी कौन गारंटी कर रहा था? इंटरनेशनल सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस. ऑल राइट. सो नंबर वन. सेकेंडली, देयर वाज सम अटेम्प्ट एट डेवलपिंग डोमेस्टिक फोर्सेस इन अफगानिस्तान कॉल्ड अफगान नेशनल डिफेंस फोर्सेस, ANDF. ऑल राइट. सो द सिक्योरिटी सिचुएशन इन अफगानिस्तान वाज ऑलवेज कैरेक्टराइज्ड बाय अ वीक अफगान नेशनल डिफेंस फोर्स. That Afghanistan's own national defense forces were always weak. So a prominent presence of international security actors, weak development of Afghan national defense forces, and thirdly, continued insurgency. Taliban हमेशा से present था वहां पे. Then ISIS started coming in. So continued insurgency. This was the basic situation of security in Afghanistan. That for security, Afghanistan was dependent on external security forces. Secondly, the development of Afghan National Defense Forces, ANDF, was less than satisfactory. And thirdly, Afghanistan continued to witness अ राइज इन इंसर्जेंसी, वायलेंस अगेंस्ट द गवर्नमेंट। ये तीन चीजें हमेशा से वहां पे रही थी। अगेन ये हमारे कंट्रोल में नहीं है। सो हमने सिक्योरिटी सिचुएशन का हमें क्या नुकसान हुआ था? 2008 अटैक्स ऑन इंडियंस इन अफगानिस्तान, इंक्लूडिंग इंडियन एम्बेसी वाज अटैक्ड इन 2008। सो ये सिक्योरिटी सिचुएशन वहां पे हमेशा से थी। और इसके साथ हमने किसको जुड़ा हुआ देखा था? देयर इज अ ग्रुप कॉल्ड द हक्कानी नेटवर्क। हक्कानी नेटवर्क is part of the Taliban government right now, and it is seen closely associated with Pakistan, ISI. All right? तो ये सिक्योरिटी चैलेंज हमारे लिए हमेशा था। अफगानिस्तान के अंदर सिक्योरिटी सिचुएशन हमारे कंट्रोल में कुछ चीजें नहीं है, ये हमको मानना चाहिए, समझना चाहिए, तभी हम जो भी चीज होती है अनफोल्डिंग सिचुएशन को रिस्पॉन्ड कर पाएंगे। डू वी कंट्रोल जियोग्राफी? No, we don't control geography. Do we control what is happening in domestically in Afghanistan? उनकी in fighting, उनका corruption? नहीं. Do we have any influence over security situation in Afghanistan? We did not. All right, because remember, sending of defense forces was never an option for India. India does not believe in sending expeditionary forces to any other country. तो ये है. So then just let's simply make an assessment of what are the options available to India. What are the options now available to India? क्या सोचते हैं आप, क्या options available है इंडिया के पास? So जब ये withdrawal हो रहा था या उससे पहले डिबेट ये था कि अभी इंडिया के पास क्या ऑप्शन है। अफगान गवर्नमेंट was in power, तालिबान was becoming strong, US was talking with तालिबान। उस समय इंडिया के पास क्या सिचुएशन था, क्या ऑप्शन था? उस समय इंडिया के पास ऑप्शन था ए, स्ट्रेंथन योर एंगेजमेंट विद अफगान गवर्नमेंट, है ना, अफगान गवर्नमेंट के साथ अपनी एंगेजमेंट को इंप्रूव कीजिए। बी, प्रोवाइड सपोर्ट टू द ANDSF, अफगान नेशनल डिफेंस एंड सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस को सपोर्ट कीजिए इनडायरेक्टली, ये ऑप्शन था इंडिया के पास, राइट। थर्डली, वर्क विथ लाइक माइंडेड कंट्रीज, यानी कि आप अफगानिस्तान के अंदर जो हो रहा है उसकी चाबी कहीं और है, द की लाइज समवेयर एल्स, सो वर्क विद लाइक माइंडेड कंट्रीज। कौन सी? यूएस, है ना, यूएस, बट ऑल्सो मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली कंट्रीज लाइक ईरान, कंट्रीज लाइक सेंट्रल एशियन कंट्रीज। तो वो उस समय के हमारे ऑप्शन थे। और चौथा ऑप्शन था वर्क ऑन पीपल टू पीपल टाइज, बिकॉज इंडियन सिनेमा इज वेरी पॉपुलर इन अफगानिस्तान, Hindi songs are very popular in Afghanistan. Cricket played an important role in creating familiarity between India and people of Afghanistan. Rashid Khan, बहुत ही बढ़िया स्पिनर है, आइडियली शुड बी इन इंडियन टीम, पर है नहीं, कोई बात नहीं। बट यू सी, इंडिया प्रोवाइडेड, अफगानिस्तान को उन्होंने होम ग्राउंड दिया, है ना, देहरादून में उनका होम ग्राउंड बनाया, नोएडा के पास उनकी इनिशियल प्रैक्टिस फैसिलिटीज। तो क्रिकेट, सिनेमा, पीपल टू पीपल टाइज शुड बी एनहांस्ड। ये ऑप्शंस थे हमारे पास पहले। अब क्या ऑप्शंस हैं? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, assessment of unfolding situation, meaning keeping an eye on the developments। आपको अवेयर रहना जरूरी है, हर महीने करंट अफेयर्स पढ़ना जरूरी है। इसलिए नहीं कि हर महीने की करंट अफेयर से क्वेश्चन ही आ जाएगा, इसलिए कि कुछ चीजें बदलती रहती हैं, तो आप you would be up to date and then you would be able to respond to things। और आप सब सोच सकते हैं कि अब इस सिचुएशन में क्या क्वेश्चन आएगा। वैसे यूपीएससी ने अफगानिस्तान पे कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं पूछा इस समय, 18, 19, 20 में कोई सवाल नहीं पूछा, क्योंकि उसको भी पता है कि आपके लिए भी बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगी, है ना, आप कैसे आर्ग्यू करें आपको भी नहीं पता। पहले जो सवाल पूछा वो सवाल क्या था? 2011 से 14 के बीच में जो जो आईसेफ था उसका ऑपरेशन पूरा हो रहा था, तो उस सिचुएशन में पूछा था कि भाई इंप्लीकेशन क्या है इंडिया के लिए और ऑप्शन क्या है इंडिया के लिए। तो हर सिचुएशन में सवाल वही होता है। तो पहला ऑप्शन क्या है? कंटिन्यूड असेसमेंट ऑफ द अनफोल्डिंग सिचुएशन। दूसरा ऑप्शन क्या है? वॉचफुल इंगेजमेंट विथ तालिबान। दैट यार ये तो बहुत ही क्लियर है ना कि अब तालिबान से बात करनी पड़ेगी। बी केयरफुल, बी वॉचफुल, इशू बेस्ड इंटरेक्शन इज नेसेसरी एंड दिस इज व्हाट वी आर सेइंग दैट वी आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स। फर्स्ट हमने कैसे देखा एंगेजमेंट कैसे इवॉल्व हुआ है तालिबान के साथ? फर्स्ट वी ओनली विटनेस द साइनिंग ऑफ पीस एग्रीमेंट। उससे पहले मॉस्को कॉन्फ्रेंस में हमने क्या किया था? नॉन ऑफिशियल रिप्रेजेंटेशन भेजा था। फिर एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स मिनिस्टर ने एड्रेस किया ऐसी मीटिंग को जहां पे तालिबान भी प्रेजेंट है ऑफिशियली। फिर हमने क्या किया? हमने मना नहीं किया कि तालिबान रिप्रेजेंटेटिव तुमसे बात नहीं करेंगे। 31 अगस्त 2021 वी टॉक्ड विद तालिबान रिप्रेजेंटेटिव। तब हमने किस तरह से बात की थी? इशू बेस्ड हमारा क्या कंसर्न है, क्या होना चाहिए, है ना। उसके बाद हमने क्या किया? वी कंटिन्यूड ह्यूमैनिटेरियन असिस्टेंस। उसके बाद हमने इस साल क्या किया? वी हैव ओपनड आवर एम्बेसी ताकि वी हैव सम प्रेजेंस देयर, वी अंडरस्टैंड, वी मेंटेन सम। सो आरंट वी मूविंग टुवर्ड्स कम्युनिकेशन विद तालिबान? तो जो हम कर रहे हैं तो वॉचफुल इंगेजमेंट विद तालिबान। वॉचफुल इंगेजमेंट का मतलब क्या हुआ? क्वालिफाइड इंगेजमेंट। ऑलराइट, इट इज नॉट अबाउट रिकॉग्नाइजिंग तालिबान प्राइमरली, इट इज अबाउट रिकॉग्नाइजिंग द एक्चुअल सिचुएशन कि जो भी अफगानिस्तान में पावर में है, अगर आपको अपना इंटरेस्ट पूरा करना है तो उनसे बात करनी पड़ेगी आपको। कई बार आपको उनसे भी बात करनी पड़ती है जिनको आप पसंद नहीं करते। आप ये मतलब सरकार में बैठ के आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि मुझे वो पसंद नहीं है। आपको बहुत सारे लोगों से बात, पब्लिक लाइफ में तो आपको बहुत सारे लोगों से बात करनी पड़ेगी, है ना। आईएएस बनने के बाद भी या ये एग्जाम पास करने के बाद भी ऐसा नहीं होगा कि मैं बात नहीं करता या मैं बात नहीं करती, मैं क्यों करूं, आई एम दी ऑफिसर। ऐसे ऑफिसर बनने पे तो फिर आपको ही मुश्किल आएगी। तो बात करनी पड़ती है। तो उस समय हम बात करेंगे अपनी प्रायोरिटीज को आइडेंटिफाई करके। और क्या है? इट इज नेसेसरी दैट वी वर्किंग विथ द इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी। भाई कहां गए वो लोग जो बड़ी बड़ी पीस की बातें करते थे? तो यूरोप को भी पीस चाहिए था अफगानिस्तान में, तो भाई यूरोप के साथ बात कर सकते हैं कि भाई क्या सोच रहे हो। और भी बहुत सारे लोग हैं, कई कैटेगरी के एक्टर्स हो सकते हैं इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी के अंदर। यूएन, वी आर अ परमानेंट मेंबर, वी नॉन परमानेंट मेंबर ऑफ द सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल एज ऑफ नाउ। सो यूएन अगेन कंटिन्यूअसली कंडक्ट्स डिबेट्स ऑन दीज काइंड्स ऑफ सिचुएशंस। सो वहां पे एक मौका है हमारे पास कि हम लगातार जो भी हमें लगता है उस पर जोर दे पाए। यूएन एक प्लेटफॉर्म हो गया। सार्क अभी रहने देते, सार्क की मीटिंग हो नहीं रही। सार्क की मीटिंग इसी बात पर रुकी हुई है कि तालिबान को बुलाएंगे कि नहीं बुलाएंगे। इंडिया अभी नहीं चाहता इस चीज का जवाब देना, तो अभी उधर जा नहीं रहा इंडिया। तो उसके बाद हम बात कर सकते हैं यूरोपियन यूनियन से, यूरोप। उसके बाद हम बात कर सकते हैं किससे? यूएस, अमेरिका से। अमेरिका जो है हमेशा इस तरह की चीजों में इंटरेस्ट रखता है और इंपॉर्टेंट है। मतलब कहीं प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट करनी हो या कहीं सॉल्यूशन लाना हो, इन दोनों ही चीजों में हमको अमेरिका के साथ बातचीत करनी पड़ेगी। पूछे भी उनसे, भाई आपने तो वादा किया था काउंटर टेररिज्म गारंटीज, कहां है काउंटर टेररिज्म गारंटी, क्या कर रहे हैं आप? अमेरिका से। इसके अलावा किससे बात कर सकते हैं? हमें बात करना जरूरी है सेंट्रल एशियन कंट्रीज और ईरान। सेंट्रल एशियन कंट्रीज एंड ईरान क्यों? सेंट्रल एशियन कंट्रीज एंड ईरान शेयर बॉर्डर्स विथ अफगानिस्तान। इंस्टेबिलिटी इन अफगानिस्तान इज एज मच देयर कंसर्न एज इट इज ऑफ इंडिया। Iran may have problems with the treatment of Taliban to the Hazaras, the treatment that Taliban makes out to the Hazaras. Hazaras are a Shia community on that side of a border. Similarly, Central Asian countries also have shared ethnicity within Afghanistan और शेयर्ड बॉर्डर भी है, तो उनका कंसर्न हमेशा वो बना रहेगा। और दूसरा, अगर हम इनके साथ दोस्त हैं तो हम अफगानिस्तान में नहीं मौजूद हों लेकिन अफगानिस्तान के आसपास मौजूद रहेंगे। All right, specifically with Central Asia, that is basically what becomes very important. That we have good relations with Central Asia, because Central Asia also holds some trump cards of India's access to Afghanistan. Iran also holds some trump cards to India's access to Afghanistan. So इनसे बात कर सकते हैं. Working with the international community. Depending on the need in the examination, you can make it into separate point. Working with countries like Iran and Central Asia because they share a border with Afghanistan. Working with United States because of its peace agreement or its agreement with Taliban. All right, or its interest, continued interest in this region, or its leverage over Pakistan. इसलिए यूएस से बात करने की जरूरत है. और किससे बात करने की जरूरत है? यूटिलाइजिंग फोरम्स लाइक यूनाइटेड नेशंस सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल फॉर मोबिलाइजिंग इंटरनेशनल ओपिनियन. फोकस अफगानिस्तान से नहीं जाना चाहिए. और किससे बात करेंगे? अब रशिया से भी बात कर लेते हैं. वाई? बिकॉज रशिया इज अ फ्रेंडली कंट्री दैट वी हैव, एंड रशिया हैज ओपन चैनल्स ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन विथ तालिबान. तालिबान के साथ ओपन चैनल ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन है रशिया का. सो डिपेंडिंग ऑन द सिचुएशन वी कैन ओपन अप दिस पॉइंट इनटू अदर पॉइंट्स. तीसरा है फोकसिंग ऑन पीपल टू पीपल टाइज. दिस वुड रिक्वायर ए thinking of assisting the Afghan refugees. Afghan refugees are present in India. अभी भी लाजपत नगर चले जाइए आप, you will find a lot of eateries, Afghan eateries. So Afghans have been a refugee, a small but significant refugee community in India. Right now also this situation may create large number of Afghan refugees. So we need to come up with policy prescriptions to deal with Afghan refugees. How do we support Afghan refugees? Secondly, humanitarian situation within Afghanistan would always require attention. Humanitarian situation within अफगानिस्तान. अफगानिस्तान के अंदर जो भी हो रहा है वो हमारा फोकस हमेशा रहना चाहिए. सो दैट इज वेयर वी नीड टू कंटिन्यू to work on providing medication, medical needs and providing food grains to Afghan people. वो लोगों के लिए हमारा कमिटमेंट है और ये फोकस होना चाहिए. अर्लियर हम इसी चीज में हम जोड़ देते थे कि क्रिकेट, सिनेमा, ये सारी चीजें. वन ऑफ द एम्बेसडर्स ऑफ अफगानिस्तान टू यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स हैड सेड दैट इन दिस रिलेशनशिप क्रिकेट एंड सिनेमा आर द टू हीरोज. इंडिया अफगानिस्तान रिलेशन में क्रिकेट और सिनेमा आर द टू हीरोज. All right, because cinema has created familiarity between India and Afghanistan. बहुत अच्छी हिंदी बोलते हैं वहाँ के लोग. आप हिंदी कहें या उर्दू कहें, बहुत सारे लोग बहुत अच्छी हिंदी उर्दू बोलते हैं. और क्रिकेट खेलना आप शुरू कर दिया तो इंडिया इज द हब ऑफ क्रिकेटिंग एक्टिविटीज ग्लोबली. तो ये सारे जो सॉल्यूशंस थे वो पहले थे, बट अल्टीमेटली किस में ये फॉल करते हैं? पीपल टू पीपल टाइज, फोकसिंग ऑन द पीपल. ये हमारे पास ऑप्शन है. इसके अलावा कोई ऑप्शन है हमारे पास? इसके अलावा कोई ऑप्शन है हमारे पास? सो इन एनी गिवन सिचुएशन आवर ऑप्शंस आर सिमिलर इन नेचर बट डिफरेंट इन स्पेसिफिक्स. स्पेसिफिक में डिफरेंस हो सकता है बट जो नेचर है हमारे ऑप्शंस का वो सेम है. ऑलराइट, किसी भी सिचुएशन में हमारे पास ये ऑप्शन नहीं है कि हम जाके वहां मिलिट्री भेज दें. हमारे पास यही ऑप्शंस हैं. एक, फोकसिंग ऑन कनेक्टिविटी विथ अफगानिस्तान. सो ईरान, सेंट्रल एशियन कंट्रीज वुड ऑलवेज बी इंपॉर्टेंट. वो चेंज नहीं होने जा रहा. असेसमेंट ऑफ द अनफोल्डिंग सिचुएशन इज नेसेसरी. क्यों? क्योंकि हम रियलाइज तभी कर पाएंगे क्या हमारे हाथ में, क्या हमारे हाथ में नहीं है. उसके अलावा वॉचफुल एंगेजमेंट विद तालिबान, रियलिटी से एंगेज करना. वर्किंग विद इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी का मतलब क्या है? जो भी प्लेटफॉर्म अवेलेबल है उसको यूज करना और हमारे फोर्स को मल्टीप्लाई करने के लिए हमें जो भी सपोर्ट चाहिए वो सपोर्ट आइडेंटिफाई करना और उसके साथ काम करना. और पीपल टू पीपल टाइज का अगला ऑप्शन ह्यूमैनिटेरियन ऑप्शन अभी ज्यादा रिलेवेंट है. जिनको भी क्लास से जाने का मन है आराम से चले जाएं. शोर मचाने की जरूरत क्या है? घंटी तो बजेगी नहीं छुट्टी के लिए. सो दिस इज वेयर वी कंप्लीट आवर अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ इंडियाज रिलेशंस विद अफगानिस्तान. ये हो गया. आपके पास कोई क्वेश्चन है, so you can come up with those questions. If not, in the next class we will talk about India Bangladesh relations. So now if you want to leave, please leave in an orderly fashion.